Well, I think we'll get underway, folks. It's just like church. There are always more seats at the front. Okay. And thank you very much for coming. It's certainly a better day than we had originally planned some time ago in the month of February. And although there were times this morning when I was a little uncertain, well, my. You have to be good. Somebody knows you well. I was up, read The Guardian before 7 o'clock and saw a couple of young farmers there with some political leaders and whatever. And so I had to be in Montague for 8:30 this morning. And as I started coming back, I saw some big flakes and then some little tick-tick-ticks on the window. And oh no. Got to Charlottetown, the flakes got bigger. I just remembered from what my grandmother Carver used to say, big flakes, little storm. Anyway, so here we are. And tomorrow night we are in Murray Harbor. I make these little announcements because we have people all over the place. There's some people up Lot 16 here and some people in Kelly's Cross and all this type of stuff tonight. So tomorrow night it is in Murray Harbor. And then there's a couple of days off, and then we are going to be in Charlottetown at the Charlottetown Hotel on Monday the 8th of April. And that's going to go from 7 till about 9:30. Don't tell many people, but if a lot of people show up that night, we're going to have a third meeting in Charlottetown the following week. And what I'm going to do is, I'll explain what I'm going to do in a moment. But the next night we were in Crappell and the Englewood School, and that's on a Tuesday night, and the storm date is the following night, April the 10th. And what I was going to say, what I'm going to do in Charlottetown, we have a number of organizations that have sent various representatives across the province, and that's wonderful. And various people have spoken and so forth and so on. And so what I'm going to do in Charlottetown, and we have some indication, a few people have already indicated they're coming with some presentations. I'm going to ask on April the 8th that we hear first from those individuals or those organizations that have never yet spoken. And then we're going to do a few of those, and then we're going to have from those who have spoken again. And I have a feeling that there's going to be a half-decent turnout there because we had about 65 or 70 people the last time, started at 7 o'clock. And I think we finished at about 9:45 to 10. And my style is to try to come early and try to stay as late as someone still wants to talk with me. So I left the Charlottetown Hotel at 10:45 that night. Okay? And so just make that observation. Then we're at the Wellington Centre, the Vanier Community Centre, Wellington, on Saturday the 13th. Now, you should have received pieces of paper when you came tonight, and they set out the long legal-size sheet of paper is what my terms of reference are, that the Executive Council has appointed me to be a commissioner under the Public Inquiries Act to deal with certain things. And it has to do with the Lands Protection Act. And right in the center of the long piece of paper, we see some numbers. And the first thing I'm to do is examine and inquire into a report regarding the adequacy of existing aggregate land holding limits, given changes in agricultural provincial land use and ownership trends in rural communities. 2, options for reducing red tape and regulatory requirements while ensuring that the Act can be effectively administered and enforced. 3, legislative concerns that have arisen involving such issues as land holding limits as they apply to utilities, application thresholds as they apply to multiple owners, and the information and deeming requirements for nonprofit corporations. Any other matter the Commissioner deems appropriate to review and bring to the attention of Executive Council. And it goes on there to say they've given me lots of power under the Public Inquiries Act and so forth. And but just because you've been given power doesn't mean you have to use it. And so under the Public Inquiries Act, I can subpoena people and documents and corporations, all that type of stuff. that is not my intent. My intent is to try to have a very informative meeting in which I do a little bit of talking, I ask some questions. My questions and comments are not intended to direct, to be a direction of where I'm going to go, but rather to try to elicit from you your feelings and your thoughts and observations. And one of the things that I have really tried to do in these hearings is that we might listen to each other, try to understand someone else's point of view, and that we might do this in the recognition that we are all members of the same community. Next year, 2014, we have a pretty important event that's happening in Prince Edward Island, and it is the 150th anniversary of the 1864 conference. And at that time, there were very few notes taken of the 1864 conference. And a gentleman, one of the delegates from Prince Edward Island, Edward Whalen, he took a few notes and he got hold of a few other people's notes and some letters that a couple of gentlemen sent back to their wives. And he put together in 1865 a little book. And what that book is, it's a report of the conferences that happened in Charlottetown, Halifax, and I'm not sure it went on to Quebec City or not. But in any event, that little book obviously went out of print. But in 1949, the Journal Publishing Company in Summerside reproduced it. Okay? And I came across a bookstore quite a few years ago in which they were selling them for $1. So I bought about 50 or 60 of them. And one time the House of Commons and Senate Legislative Committee came to Charlottetown to hear certain things about what they were trying to do in the early 90s. And so I gave each of them a copy of them, the book. But my favorite quote is contained in some comments of George Etienne Cartier, the Attorney General of Lower Canada. And he's talking about the time of how we're going to bring together a nation called Canada. And remember that Canada was created by the colonies that are now the provinces, as opposed to the nation creating the colonies. That is of some historical significance. But Cartier said this: there are difficulties in the way, but they are susceptible of solution if managed with wisdom. All that is requisite to overcome is a strong will and a good heart. Well, I can tell you, I am of the firm opinion that there are lots of strong wills. There are also, I believe, good hearts. And so I would ask that we might try to listen and understand other points of view, because as I said earlier, we're all in the same community. Now, we're going to do something a little different here tonight. We have, where is he? Evan? Okay. Now, one of the things that's, well, a number of things have surprised me, but one of the things that has really sort of surprised me is to find out that this young man, and he is from Kensington area, and he started as a summer student the other year, and somehow his term got extended a little bit, but he is a geographer. Okay? There aren't many geographers in the room here tonight, I suspect. Anyway, Evan, where'd you take your geography education?
St. Mary's.
In Halifax. Okay. Now, I've asked him, he was working on this independent. He's the gentleman that produced these maps. Okay? And it's absolutely amazing what he can do with his fingers and all this type of stuff. So I've asked him to do a little film for us tonight. I didn't ask him to do it initially, but I've asked him to be here tonight. And he's going to take a couple of areas of Prince Edward Island, including North Rustico, and show to us how much of the land is owned by non-residents. And that is land that is reddish in color, is it? Okay. Okay. Let's do the East Point area first. And Albert McDonald's in charge of lights, and you just open the canteen a little bit, and you can sell popcorn, chocolate bars. And, all right? Okay.
the mic a little closer. Mic.
Okay, let's go back again.
Yeah.
Can you raise it higher in the screen? Can you tip the front up and tip it higher?
You're allowed to stand as long as you don't stand somebody else. Okay, it's going awful fast, Evan. Can we slow it down? So just look at the top there, 40 by 45? 45.
45% of the coastline between East Point and St. Peter's Bay is owned by non-resident, and you'll see all those properties that are shown in red are non-resident owned.
How much of it's woodland?
We don't have the statistics broken down as to agriculture and woodland, but there'd be a lot more here than you'll see in the next video on Rustico, where in this area, 50% of the properties are under 5 acres. If you look at the Rustico area, it's 93% of the properties are under 5 acres in size. So there's a lot more residential in the Rustico area. Down here, it seems there's large plots of land that are still 50 acres in size that haven't been subdivided.
Now, Evan, I asked you, it's Evan McDonald, I asked Evan to take the acreage and put it into slots, and so you did that, and what did you come up with?
So for the eastern part of the island, for that stretch there, there was 50%.
Maybe we'll run it again while you're chatting.
Sure.
Please. We're rather demanding, as you can see.
Yeah, 50% of the properties in that area, I think there was 303 properties in total that fell within about 500 meters of the coast. 50% of them were under 5 acres. 25% were between 5 and 20 acres in size, and the other 25% were over 20 acres. I think the biggest parcel of land was about 220 acres. For the statistics, I did, but you could do that. You could do that anywhere on the island. You could draw a circle anywhere you wanted to find out. Say you just want to do one community, you could find that out pretty easy.
And see the map behind Evan, printed on non-resident properties. The one to the right, Ruth. The one on the right. That shows all of the island. Okay.
Anything in red on this would be, you'd find it on here as well.
Yeah. I found it extremely interesting in a whole bunch of regards. One, it's that there seemed to be a lot of red. I also thought that some of the acreage plots were larger than I perhaps anticipated. Okay. Now we're going to, I know I said 2, but you have Tignish there as well, do you? I do, yeah. Okay. Tignish is an interesting area. Oh, sure. Well, we'll do Rustico a couple of times. We'll do it now again. Okay, just slow down on that now.
So that's coming in from Cavendish.
So we're looking down the creek now, are we?
Yep. So you can see in that area the lots are a lot smaller because they're residential. 93% of those lots are under 5 acres. 5% are between 5 and 20 acres, and only 2% are over 20 acres in size. I think the biggest was about 85.
Okay. We always like looking at our own area, so I think we'll do that again. Okay. And then we'll hit up to Tignish and do one over Tignish.
What's the percentage in Rustico housing where you had 45?
Okay, 23% in that area that we just 23% of the total.
Now, just look at the top, 49%. There are several reasonably large areas. One is the peat moss area, and then there's some of the islands, and I believe that's the Conservatory of Canada. And so non-resident owned really shoots it up. We come to the bog there, Evan, you can show us, please.
There's quite a bit of subdivision here in Anglo-Tignish outside the town, in Tignish Shore there. So that's an island there, kind of dunes, I guess, it's owned by a man from Halifax. And this peat bog moss here, there's some pretty large parcels of land in there.
How many acres are in that?
That stretch there, I don't know the exact number, I'm guessing probably 500 or 1,000.
Okay. So where's our student Nathan here? You'll be able to get some brownie points that your other colleagues didn't get at the other sessions, because this is the first time we've shown these. Evan has just been putting them together. All right. Thank you, Evan. And Evan will be around here this evening, so afterwards he can give you more detailed answers to some of your questions. In 1998, the Lands Protection Act was amended, and it's on page 2 of your sheets. And it was to clearly put in what is the purpose of the legislation. And the purpose of the legislation, Lands Protection Act, is to provide for the regulation of property rights in Prince Edward Island, especially the amount of land that may be held by a person or corporation. This act has been enacted in recognition that Prince Edward Island faces singular challenges with regard to property rights as a result of several circumstances, including A, historical difficulties with absentee landowners, and the consequent problems faced by the inhabitants of Prince Edward Island in governing their own affairs, both public and private. The problems of small land area and comparatively high population density, unique among the provinces of Canada, and the fragile nature of the province's ecology, environment, and lands, and the resultant need for the exercise of prudent balance and steadfast stewardship to ensure the protection of the province's ecology, environment, and lands. So that's a purpose that was put in about 15 years ago. It wasn't there in the original statute. Now, I think we are going to get underway a little bit here. I'm just going to check my BlackBerry and make sure that I have shut it off. And it looks like I have. And I know that there are several individuals or groups that have come with the idea of making a little bit of formal presentation, so I think we'll call upon them right now. And the Homestead Farm, would you like to be the first?
Actually, although I'm a member of the Homestead Farm, I'm acting on
You're on your own behalf.
my own behalf.
Okay, all right, good. We clarify up the mistakes the commissioner's making right off the bat. Right there, have a seat. Thank you. And I'll get you to state your name and
Sure.
where you live. I believe that's Hope River. And
Commissioner, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. My name is Peter Eiselstein. I was born and raised on a dairy farm in Brampton, Ontario. I have a master's degree in agricultural economics from the University of Guelph and a MBA degree from the University of Prince Edward Island. I own a 4-acre farm in Hope River, and on this farm, I'm able to obtain about 30% of my personal yearly income. Land grabbing is part of human history. Land grabbing on this earth has resulted in untold human suffering, violence, and death. Land grabbing began here on this island in 1767. It took a lot of effort to dismantle this type of land grab ownership. We are here today because there are individuals, farm organizations, and politicians who would like to revert back to the good old days of colonial proprietorship. Having said this, let me begin by briefly describing the current situation in St. Lawrence County and upstate New York with respect to the Amish community as recorded in an article in Atlantic magazine last year. In the past decade,
Peter, which briefcase, what publication was that?
Atlantic magazine.
Okay.
Okay. In the past decade, St. Lawrence County has witnessed a growing number of thousand-cow dairies and a significant increase in large corporate farms specializing in genetically modified starch crops. These corporate farms are vying with the Amish farm stands who are selling strawberries, vegetables, and maple syrup. The Amish people are losing territory to subsidized corporate interests who are buying up the St. Lawrence County's clay loam soil. The Amish say they cannot compete with large agribusinesses. The Amish say it is getting harder for young people to find farms in the area. The Amish have to move farther afield because of the unavailability of land to purchase. For the Amish, acquiring new land is an escalating burden because the corporate farmer is willing to pay 3 or 4 times the market rate. Besides bidding up the market price for land in the county, land assessment values have more than doubled, resulting in higher property taxes and financial distress. I have conducted a literature review of land issues on Prince Edward Island. I have also researched land issues as part of my master's degree thesis. Based on my research findings, I am opposed to any increase in land acreage ownership for individuals and corporations. In fact, I would argue that the limits on land ownership should be decreased, not increased. Basically, what are the differences between small and large farms? The first has to do with scale differences. I have observed that small farms have more varied field structures, more hedgerows, and patches of uncultivated land. With regard to production intensity, larger farms are often more intensely managed, use more fertilizer and sprays. For example, they will have less biodiversity and are more likely to cause water and air pollution. But what about farmers' attitudes? I found small farms to have a more empathetic relationship with their land and nature, whereas larger farms have a more utilitarian and rationalistic attitude. The outcomes, again, will be more environmentally friendly farming on smaller farms. A study conducted by the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences compared the diversity and the abundance of birds, as well as butterflies, bumblebees, and herbaceous plants between 6 small farms and 6 large farms in southeastern Sweden. More than twice as many bird species, butterflies, and herbaceous plant species, and 5 times more bumblebees were found on the small compared to the large farms. This study led to the policy conclusion that regional stakeholders should consider measures to prevent or at least reduce the farm sizes in the future. My own personal research into land resource issues in Ontario in the 1980s found larger farms making no investments into soil erosion control measures, soil building practices, and large farms were primarily engaged in corn and soybean monoculture. For example, my father started out farming in Brampton, Ontario in 1956. He milked approximately 40 cows. His only crops were hay and small grains. In 1968, he moved to Woodstock, Ontario. In his first year, he proceeded to tear out lines of trees and hedgerows, which he later regretted because of extensive soil erosion and silting issues. He doubled his milking cow herd and changed the diet of his cows to corn silage. With corn came the application of atrazine. Every year during spray season, he was irritable, he felt sick, and deprived of sleep. He was not a happy person to be around. In January of this year, I visited northern India, the Punjab region, which is considered to be the main agricultural region and breadbasket of India. An article appeared in the local paper which stated that the Punjab region had the highest rates of cancer in all of India, many times higher than the average national rate. What a coincidence, cancer and agriculture. It should come as no surprise that the PEI has the highest rates of hospitalization for asthma in Canada, as well as high rates of cancer. PEI is also a highly intensive agricultural region, and increasing the limits of agricultural land ownership can only mean one thing: more potato cultivation followed by corn and soybeans, hence more applications of poison and nitrates to the land. A recent snowmelt showed the disastrous consequences of present-day agricultural practices with respect to soil management. In summary, rural communities will be negatively impacted by a further reduction in rural businesses offering products and services. The ecology of the rural countryside will be negatively impacted as fields become larger as a result of lines of trees and hedgerows are rubbed out to accommodate larger pieces of machinery. There will be an increased use of pesticide and herbicides, resulting in further fish kills and marginalized ecosystems. There will be an increase in soil mismanagement as more land will be cultivated for potatoes, soybeans, and corn. In fact, soybean and corn cultivation is currently allowed on land with more than 9% grade. There will be an increased competition for land, which will drive up land costs and result in higher property taxes. Beginning farmers who want to farm on a small scale will find it more difficult to find land to purchase at an affordable price. And the principle of food security and diversity is at stake here. And finally, farms need to get larger in order to survive. This is a myth. Efficiency is not about size or catering to large equipment manufacturers. Instead, farmers and PEI need to operate differently by becoming better caretakers of the land that they presently own. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you, Peter. Just stay there for a sec. I'm just making it rain. This is my assistant, Patrick Carroll. And he's a scribe and does everything I asked him to. We'd love a copy of that. And I just asked him to shut the screen off. It was starting to affect my eyes, and I'm sure it was hit on for you people. I thought just we'd have it shut off, and if you want to see anything later in the evening, fine. Thank you. And you were telling me that you moved to Prince Edward Island, what, 2008 was it? Or
Yeah, 2008, yeah,
Okay?
yeah.
And I'm interested in a number of things you said, but one of the things I'm interested in, you're quite clear that you're opposed to increasing limits, but then you go so far as to say that you think that in fact the limits should be decreased, not increased. So that's both for an individual and corporate farm involving 3 individuals, equal shareholders. And so how do you propose that to happen if you already have an individual that owns 990 acres? Are they going to be grandfathered in?
Well, that's a very, very difficult to do. Once you've allowed people to own that much land, it's very hard to say, well, you got to sell a chunk of it, you know. But we really need to put the brakes on increasing land ownership for a lot of people. And as we can see now, in the future, we're going to be talking more and more about non-resident people owning land, and we're going to be talking about maybe, you know, other types of limits on that kind of that kind of ownership as well too, because a lot of that land is not used in agriculture anymore. It's going toward, you know, building cottages, etc., or recreation facilities and stuff. So, no, I think if it's possible. In certain areas of PEI, there may have to be a rollback, if we ever came to that, a rollback in land ownership.
When you say rollback, you mean taking action to order someone to divest themselves of lands that they presently legally own?
Well, I think there's a lot of people that are skirting a lot of the rules and regulations where family members are consolidating, accumulating land, land being held in the name of one person or in the name of a corporation, and them being affiliated with other individuals that are also purchasing land and putting into another name of a corporation and stuff, and that kind of a consolidation.
Well, there are some rumors out there, but when people are a little on the shy side of producing the facts, and if you have a law, and there are many significant parts of the Lands Protection Act of 1982, but one of them was that for the very first time, residents of Prince Edward Island who live here more than 183 days a year, and that's the definition of residency in the statute, is that there was a limit put on the amount of land that they could own, that the residents of the province could own, which is 1,000 acres.
Yes.
And then if you carry that over to a corporation, then it's 3 equal shareholders of 3,000 acres. And so, you know, then you get in the whole area of, well, do you need so much land to farming? Maybe, maybe not. Different points of view in that. But one of the questions I've asked in the past, why should I, as a Charlottetown lawyer who presently owns no land and I have no shares in a private company that owns land, my wife has a half an acre of land in Charlottetown, and that's where our home is. That's the amount of land that we own in PEI, Horace and Lucille Carver, is that do I need the right to have to own 1,000 acres in Prince Edward Island if it's not being used in some form of agriculture? Like, that's a lot of land for me to be able to own. Anyway, what's the limit that you're thinking of?
Well, I think there's a lot of people coming, and I know several individuals that come to PEI, and they're interested in mixed farming. And we're interested, I have 4 acres, others have maybe 10 or 15 or 50 acres of land. That's all they want, okay? But they want to be able to farm land, they want to become farmers, and they want to be able to purchase that land at an affordable price. If we're talking about food security and buy local and all that, if more and more land is being consolidated and owned by very few individuals, that land won't come back on the market, if ever. It's just going to drive up the price of land and make it more and more difficult for people to find bits of land that they can farm.
Well,
And you know, for the overall health of agriculture, we need as many farmers as possible. We just can't afford to have the whole island go to a few farmers. That'll just
well, we
cause
have
great problems
we have a
in the
number of
future.
young farmers that are here tonight, farmers who I met, I guess, the middle of February at the farm center one evening. Hopefully they'll make some comments tonight and indicate how they see their needs. And
See, we're getting the same situation as the Amish are finding themselves in upstate New York, and they're having to move further afield. generational transfer of land from father to son is very important to them over there.
Yes.
And they're not able to keep up with subsidized agriculture. The big corporate interests that are moving in, buying up all that land acreage, and so they either have to choose to get out of farming or find other areas to move where they can still purchase land.
Well, I suspect that the rules and regulations that exist here don't exist there, and there are some, because of the rules we presently have, it's not as easy to buy land here as
Yeah.
I'm sure it's there. Peter, I'm going to let it be for that now, and maybe later on there'll be an opportunity for you to make some further comments. And is your garlic sold locally?
It'll be sold, island garlic, yep.
Okay, good. So, as I said to you earlier,
Island sunflowers, island vegetables.
garlic's very healthy. We'd like a copy of your comments, if that would be fine.
Yeah.
Patrick? Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to call now upon Ann Wheatley and Rob Sharkey, and they represent the Environmental Coalition of Prince Edward Island, and they've contacted us and indicated that they would be here tonight making a presentation. And so, Ann and Rob, thank you.
Thank you. So the Environmental Coalition of Prince Edward Island is a community-based group. It was formed in 1988. And what we do is to promote public awareness and understanding of the issues that affect the environment, that affect our land, our water, and our forests. And we take action to protect it. So the Environmental Coalition of Prince Edward Island would like to add its voice to those who want to maintain the existing Land Protection Act and the limits to land holdings in this province. We see land as more than just a commodity. Our land and our water is what gives us life, and we need to protect it. We see how our land in Prince Edward Island and our water, but our land is under pressure from development, whether it's industrial or residential, whether it's roads, from intensive agriculture and from forestry. And those changes that are happening as a result of that development are irreversible. At this time in history, we need to be doing everything we can to protect our land and water. It seems critical to give the environment more value in all of our policies, our decisions, and practices, and make stewardship more of a priority. So Prince Edward Island, by definition, has a limited land base. And with such a small amount of land to start with, increasing land holding limits would lead to a higher concentration of ownership by large landowners and corporations. That, in turn, will lead to richer, more powerful corporations and cause a shift in control over the land away from local communities. This could be a challenge in terms of stewardship, and I think Rob will talk a little bit more about that later, as those who own the land have less of a vested interest in how it's preserved for future generations and in its inherent ecological value. In the 1980s, there was great concern that large agricultural corporations from New Brunswick and elsewhere would start purchasing large amounts of farmland in PEI, making it impossible for islanders to farm in their own province. Led by the National Farmers Union, pressure was brought to bear on the provincial government, and the Land Protection Act was enacted, limiting private ownership to 1,000 acres and corporate ownership to 3,000 acres. While this certainly didn't solve all of the problems faced by the agricultural community in this province, it did make it possible to continue a tradition of family farms. The pressure to expand and carry more debt load still existed, but at least there were some limits imposed. A move to larger and larger farms would increase pressure on smaller operators, who will incur higher land costs and may potentially be shut out of existing markets because they don't produce a large enough volume to bother with. Processors and purchasers ideally would like to deal with just a few growers to meet all of their needs, but is that truly the best for the majority of island farmers and our island farm workers? Larger corporate farms would do nothing to increase our food security, which is becoming an increasing concern in light of what's happening around the globe. Many smaller jurisdictions increasingly find themselves at odds with large-scale farming. Research has shown that increasing productivity through small-scale farms results in much better outcomes in terms of economic growth, employment generation, and poverty reduction. Small to mid-sized farms that grow a mixture of crops can contribute to our food security within the province. More and more fields of potatoes or soybeans will not solve this problem. PEI is small and it's an island. As we look towards a time when importing food becomes more and more expensive in terms of money as well as cost to the environment, that smallness of scale could serve us well. Investing in small mixed farms that produce a variety of products with the capacity to feed our communities could increase our food security. We can see now that there's a renewed interest in buying locally and supporting local producers. Large land holdings favor the industrial model of agriculture, which relies on the export market, which in turn relies on monoculture, increased use of chemicals, and large machinery that's often just bad for the land, the air, and the water. Of course, in Prince Edward Island, we have a pretty small population, and our capacity to produce food far outweighs our capacity to consume it. So we do need a balance of an export and a domestic market. But if we change the landscape to make it easier for bigger corporations to buy up land, we risk leaning more and more to the export side of things, and we risk losing our capacity to feed ourselves.
I forgot to say that the mics here aren't just for amplification. They are being recorded, and through time that these proceedings are able to be tapped into and all that type of stuff.
That's good.
Rob?
That's good to know.
Okay.
I'm Rob Sharkey. I've been a member of the Environmental Coalition for quite a few years. I have a strong interest in the environment, but before that, I spent about a decade working on a mixed farm, my neighbor's farm. They grew potatoes, had beef, and dairy. So I come at this from sort of a couple of different perspectives. Obviously, the idea of a working landscape, such as agriculture and forestry, should be a vital part of the island community. This is crucial to the island way of life that we value so highly and which many visitors come here to experience. Unfortunately, poor land use practices which lead to soil erosion, fish kills, nitrate pollution, and anoxic conditions in our waterways are at odds with our tourist operators, fishers, conservation organizations, and residents. Indeed, the island way of life is actually rapidly disappearing and is hastened by our shift away from smaller sustainable farming and forestry operations as we try to compete on equal footing with much larger markets. There is more and more pressure on our fragile environment, as we have seen from examples such as low water levels in the Winter River and the Barclay Brook fish kill up west, another in a series of dozens of fish kills that have been happening over the decades. As we work towards solutions to these problems, it will be local people applying local knowledge and working cooperatively that will have the highest likelihood of success. In the agricultural sector, more than ever, we need to work together to set concrete targets to reduce soil erosion, pesticide use, and increase our levels of organic matter in our soils and strengthen existing legislation to protect our waterways. We also need to ensure that producers who meet these good standards receive a fair price for the products that will allow them to stay in business. What we don't need is to keep getting bigger, especially without significant controls on how that might impact our island environment. And as we have seen, the control measures we have are sometimes insufficient. When a landowner is engaged in the process of finding a more sustainable way to move forward, everyone benefits. It is difficult to imagine a homegrown solution finding much traction in a boardroom. When discussing land limits, we tend to think solely of agricultural, but we also need to think about our remaining forest land. Forests and riparian areas are linked and directly impact water quality and quantity on the island, whereas 100% of our drinking water comes from the ground. Without good land limit protection, what would stop a large corporation from New Brunswick, for example, we might know what I'm talking about there, from buying up more of the island's forested land and gaining control of what's left of our own silvicultural industry? Are we really interested in increasing the amount of industrial forestry in this province? Or should we focus on the many values that healthy, diverse forests provide, from reducing wind erosion to retaining and filtering water, And we also need to ensure that small woodlot owners and forestry workers have the opportunity to move in a more sustainable direction and receive the value added, rather than just being forced to accept poor prices for raw product. We have opportunities for significant environmental improvement on the island. Because we're relatively a small community, we have a unique position to take advantage of value-added sectors if we proceed in a thoughtful manner. For many years, watershed groups have been working with local landowners to achieve positive environmental results. Watershed groups very often work with farmers, fishermen, everybody in the community to achieve good stuff in their local community, and it's those people that actually want to see the difference. There's a long way to go, as we see in the news, but positive change is possible because these groups deal with local landowners who have a vested interest in protecting their land, our home. Through increased education efforts, thoughtful planning, and solid legislation that protects the land and the landowner, we can achieve these goals. But it is important to remember that the successes of conservation groups have enjoyed is a direct result of neighbors talking with neighbors. Conservation groups engage local landowners in environmental improvement plans where the landowner is directly involved and sees a direct improvement in the environment and on their land. Such efforts would not be as successful if small groups had to deal with larger and larger landholders or large corporations. There continues to be pressure from within and without Canada to do away with any kind of limits to land ownership, and that might make sense in this province the size of Alberta, but it certainly doesn't in Prince Edward Island. This province, by its very size and nature, is much more ecologically and economically fragile than larger jurisdictions, and it's deserving of our protection. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leanne and Rob. We certainly would like to receive the comments. You have your notes there and so forth. And just a couple of questions. Need to be working together, of course, and you say neighbor talking with neighbor. And I believe you mentioned that you want to maintain the existing limits, but now you've had the benefit of hearing Peter a few moments ago make the argument that limits should come down. Okay? So having had the benefit of his comments, we know you're opposed to the limits going up. From your own statement, it was maintain the limits. I've been a little surprised through some of the hearings that there's been so little suggestion that some of the limits should come down. Now you can say, oh, well, Carver's off on a tangent. No, I'm just trying to toss some things out there to get suggestions and replies coming back from individuals.
I think that the idea of bringing the limits down is an interesting one, and I think that it would require sort of putting on a whole, looking at it with a different lens almost. But I think there's a lot of value to it. I think my worry at this point is that by sort of opening up the act to change, we need to make sure that at least what we've got now is maintained. So if we start sort of changing it, does that open it up for change in the future too?
Well, I think if there's one thing certain about the terms of reference, it is that there's a whole bunch of things to be looked at in this particular instance. I might say that one of the things that has amazed me as someone who was directly involved in the passage of this law 30 years ago, there was a legislative committee that made recommendations. Premier McLean was the premier. I was the Attorney General. He said, Horace, you're the person to get this through the House. And so I was directly involved, very heavily involved with the drafting legislation. And there have been a lot of changes, Anne and Rob, since then. Starting off, farmers didn't have to make application any time to acquire a deed. If they're a farming corporation, they were exempt as long as they're inside. And now, if they get anything that adds more than 5 acres to their existing landholding, they have to apply. There's been a lot more forms and regulations have happened. There's been a tremendous number of changes in the legislation. One time, lands that were leased in were counted, but if you leased them out, they weren't. And now, if you lease them in, they're counted. But if you lease them out to somebody, you can't deduct them. And things along that line. But one of the things that I've been surprised about as we look back now with 30 years, that with the exception of the late 80s, when there was a challenge in the courts about the leasing in and leasing out provision, and it looked as if there was going to be a court challenge probably in the early 90s that the premier, then Premier Gibbs, had asked me to represent government, but I was able to negotiate a situation where there was another court settlement, so lands were divested as opposed to having to go to court. There have been no other legal actions taken in the courts pertaining to this legislation, which is, and I've asked this and no one's proved me wrong, that's really quite an amazing statement. Quite an amazing statement. So there seems to be some respect for it out there. One can argue, well, maybe people are being creative how to do different things. Well, in the society in which we live, we're permitted to be creative if it is lawful, okay? And so when you suggest your fear of opening up the statute, I can tell you that there are a fair number of individuals that are suggesting the statute be open. So now I will only make the recommendations. It's up to the Executive Council to decide what to do. But if you have suggestions tonight about if you think limits should be lowered, I'd be awfully interested in hearing it, because we're getting a lot of suggestions the other way to either maintain or to raise.
And I guess it's also a matter of, you know, if we were looking at reducing the limit, at lowering them, sort of how does the number, how is that developed? What kind of, yeah.
Yeah, good question. Not trying to put you on the spot, but as anybody here that can take my business card, including you, Rob, Peter, and anyone else, and if you have other thoughts, you want to make them later on after the meeting by email or otherwise, fine. So thank you. And we'll get your copies of your brief. And while Rob, and don't walk away, Rob, don't walk away with the paper. No, that's fine. We find that if we don't get the paper tonight, it's a little hard to get it. Okay. Now, just looking at this crowd, I've seen a number of you before, and so I know you're more than capable of making your thoughts known. But I see some people tonight for the first time, and so we're looking forward to hearing your comments as well. That wasn't supposed to make anybody nervous. Yes, sir. Would you like to? And I think what we're going to do as well, I'm going to ask one of our technicians, that's fine, you just have a seat there, or somebody just to move that mic so that so if somebody wants to stand and not sit down, that they can do so. This mic here, it's not as functional as I would like. I mean, I can see and hear from you, and I'm sure that you would prefer to speak to people as opposed, people would like to see your face as opposed to your back. So, all right, sorry. Just over there in front of Mrs. Brewer is fine. That's great, thanks. Okay. Now, I met you on the way coming in. I know you're a friend of Peter's, and your name?
My name is Charles Lipnicki,
Okay, Charles.
and I'm opposed to increasing. Land holdings for people who are not corporations and those that are. It's pretty simple that to me that the idea that you can have over 1,000 acres requires really, really intense machinery. It requires a lot of what we call inputs into agriculture, and that's never a good thing. I come from Ontario. I came here to be a farmer, and I saw Prince Edward Island from a different set of eyes, because to me, I saw a place that had so much fantastic opportunities for agriculture, in addition to all the other components that make up the economy here. And, you know, where I come from, this has already happened to the point where, like, corporations have increased the costs of land, and people that wanted to maybe start farming would never be able to. And I was talking to a lot of local people, getting to know a lot of islanders, long-term islanders, and hearing about hedgerows that used to be and how they were all taken down when the big machines came. And as others have said, you can see a lot of signs of erosion in the area. We're hearing a lot in the news lately about water quantity and water quality. And anything that requires so much mechanized farming is bad for water. And water is the most important thing we've got. We're made of water, and everything we rely on comes from water. So there's also, you know, we're a small island, and being a small island gives you a unique opportunity for change. If I came here from another place and I saw a place where there was family farms, where there was small acreages being managed in creative ways by a number of different people, believe me, that would get my attention. A lot of the economy here relies on tourism. And when we hear about agriculture and the amount of land that's required by larger corporations to be sustainable, what you're not hearing in that equation is that when people come here and they're coming from away, and they want to see the cows by the side of the road. They want to see the eggs for sale at the end of the lane. They want to see those little fields. There was a presentation in the fall that I attended at the McPhail Homestead, and the guest speaker was a Dr. Lippert. He was from the state of Maine. He also has connections to the island. But the interesting thing was he was talking about Maine and how it relates to Prince Edward Island and how there are a lot of similarities. Maine relied on tourism. It had a strong economy that came from their forestry and fishing, as you know. And that sounds a lot like PEI. Over time, the agricultural holdings were, you know, their economy was going down, and at one time in the early 90s there was only 300 registered farmers in the entire state of Maine. They came up with programs to encourage small family-owned farms, and those small farms started to grow, and it was 5 acres, 15 acres, 20 acres, 50 acres, and people doing things in creative ways and sustainable ways, to the point where today there's 8,100 farms. That's quite a change. That's quite a jump in a relatively short time. And their tourism has benefited from that too. So as a person who came here wanting to be a mixed farmer, I think this is a great island, a great place to be actively involved in something that's fast disappearing. And as Peter alluded, once you lose it, it's pretty hard to get it back. So I would encourage everybody to think twice about expanding any landholding opportunities to corporate interests.
Now, we didn't make it abundantly clear tonight, but either I or others in the audience have done it before, that you could have 3 individuals, and they can be farming on a particular farm, and they can come together, be family or friends, and equal shareholders, and they incorporate and become a corporation. And if they weren't incorporated, they'd be individual farmers. So sometimes some implied attachment comes along with the word corporation when they get incorporated. And some individuals in the audiences on other occasions have made the point that you can still have a family farm that's incorporated.
Sure you can. Yeah.
Yep. I think it was in Surrey. We had a small crowd in Surrey. I don't know what's going on, but anyway. And one of the gentlemen in the potato industry was making the point that the potato industry in PVYN was hit very hard, hit the province very hard with PVYN, and the main border was closed immediately. And I gratuitously made the comment, as I sometimes do in these meetings, that it just shows the power of American politics. At that point in time, Senator George Mitchell was the leader of the Democratic Party in the Senate, and the border got closed just like that. Well, the other weekend, some personal family business took me down to the state of Maine for a weekend. We checked into the hotel in Portland, Maine, And as I was checking in, I looked around and there were TV cameras. And guess who were they interviewing? George Mitchell. And I said, that'll prove. Here I'm talking about the man less than a week before, and there he is, okay? But one of the interesting things about Maine, I was reading the Maine newspaper, and I actually brought it back with me, and they were indicating what they did down there is they raised bonds with the purpose, in part, of using the money raised from these bonds to go out and buy developmental rights for farmers. And in one particular instance, this family had been in their farming for about 5 or 6 generations, but it came to the point that the land was so valuable and was taxed so heavily, and that it was going to be impossible for the son to take over. So what happened is bonds were raised, and then an organization, I don't know if it was government or otherwise, used that money to buy the development rights, and then the father gets the development right money, and then the land is passed on to the son, who farms, but knowing that it's going to be used for agricultural purposes. Okay. And I found it an interesting concept, and I've talked about it before a little bit, about landscapes and vistas and buying development rights. And the interesting thing about this bond, because then my mind got thinking back to the Second World War, and I was not born when the Second World War existed. But they had victory bonds during the Second World War. And the whole purpose was that Canadians would invest their money in victory bonds to do certain things so their government could achieve certain things so we could win the war. And the interesting thing about this concept, my victory bond idea, is that those of us who are not in the farming industry and would like to see some significant changes happen, we'd like to see more young farmers come along, it provides us the opportunity to open our wallets and write checks, to have bonds that money can be used to buy farmland, and then young farmers can lease it and have an area of access. So what do you think of that idea?
Well, there's a lot of creative ways that you can structure development, but I think anytime you start to go through too many channels, things can get pretty convoluted and pretty intimidating. One thing that the island is doing now, and I hope they keep, a program that they keep, is called the Future Farmer Program. And it's amazing. It's a way that the province is reaching out and saying there are benefits that they can offer to potential new small farm owners that will help them get started. And that can be in the form of monies allocated for education, which is a big part of it. There is apprenticeship type programs, mentoring programs, and they do help offset certain costs associated with farming with a interest subsidy on certain loans. So I think it's good because instead of saying, okay, here's a gift, good luck, it's saying, okay, we'll help you out, but we're going to help you up. We're not going to give it to you, you're going to earn it, but we're helping you along the way. And I think that's fantastic. And that's another thing that really encouraged me to look at PEI as a place to come. And, every time you bring somebody here from another place, you're adding also to your local economy, and brings dollars into the community, brings ideas, brings employment, so many things. So regardless of what happens, I think even if you don't do these clawbacks and rollbacks and things like that, send a message that, hey, we're not going to allow you to just railroad and steamroll everybody else. Just, leave it as is.
Okay. You've just made some statements like grand railroad and bulldoze and everything. What do you mean by those statements?
Well, I know that big money talks, and I know that agribusiness is big money, and I know that when large corporations are given the liberties to grow without restraint, they will. And I don't want to see the farmland here likened to that of Walmart mentality, where you get a big corporation that says, well, look at all the employment I'm bringing, and leaves you with a hollow promise.
Well, there are different points of view on all these types of things, of course. I've told this story a couple of times, and maybe I can tell it tonight. My wife and I went to the Dr. David Suzuki lecture, and there was a reception in the Province House later, and that was just a few days after my appointment had been announced. And of course, people were coming over and bending my ear, and I was listening to them and all this type of stuff. And as we walked down the street, my wife says to me, she says, "Horace," she says, "everyone seems to have an opinion on the Lands Protection Act." I said, "That's right." And she says, "Not everybody agrees with each other." And that's right, too. And having gone through a lot of these hearings, I'm even more of that particular opinion. Okay, we're going to let you go, Charles, but at some time during the evening, there's something I'm going to say that is sort of directly related to what you and someone else have said. And I might say that I'm always impressed when people receive applause for different points of view than maybe what you personally hold, and it's very respectful. And somebody else. Judy McDonald, you're there in the third row, and you're a past chair of Taipei and operating a tourist association. You're Bourgeois Inn over at South Rustico, and we heard from your brother Normie in Charlottetown. You have anything you'd like to say? Well, we'll give you a couple of minutes to think about it, and then we'll come back, Judy. Okay? Mr. Gass.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Commissioner, is there anybody else on your list of people who are agreed to talk about that?
Thank you, Mel. Not that I'm aware of, but anyone else come with a prepared text? No? Way you go.
Okay, I have something to say,
Big surprise.
but I don't have a prepared brief.
That's fine. I might say that, Mel, I consciously decided against doing that. I know sometimes people have said in these types of hearings, not mine, that you need to submit written briefs 7 days in advance, but no, I haven't wanted to do that. So you can either sit or stand.
I'm going to sit.
Good for you.
I'm old enough that I can sit.
Now. Not that old.
Mr. Commissioner, ladies and gentlemen, I had a bit of a problem in deciding whether or not I wanted to come tonight. And it's not because I don't have views on land use and so on. But I want to go back to a number of years ago. And I'm speaking specifically about water and how important it is to this island and farming and tourism and everything else. And I started off by making a note that some years ago, farmers weren't allowed, after being allowed for a number of years, to draw water from streams to irrigate. Instead, government decided that they couldn't do that, but they'd have to drill wells. And I said, you know, that doesn't make any sense to me. They're drawing water from a stream, and unless they're reducing it to the situation where there's not enough left for the fish habitat, they're taking fresh water that 20 minutes or 30 minutes or 45 minutes at the most downstream. It's not going to be fresh any longer. It's going to be in the head at the top of the river or in the Gulf or the Strait. That didn't make any sense. When you dig wells, you draw down the water supply. And that then was only a few years until government decided that there's no more deep wells for farmers to use for irrigation. They saw the mistake that they had made. Governments all over the province, governments were removing dams all over the province. Why? Because the dams had sort of filled up with silt, and the water became warm, and the fish weren't able to multiply in it, and was causing warmer water downstream. So they removed the dams. Those dams, that was a mistake in my opinion. Those dams were actual catch basins and settling ponds. And because they were so effective in what they were doing with keeping back runoff and erosion from going on further, they filled up. And that's why the water became warm. So the governments decided that all these dams have to come out. A very important point that those dams was doing at the time that they were filtering out the erosion, they were putting more water into our underground water table. So we lost all of those dams that was replenishing our underground water table. And now we have buffer zones. Farmers have buffer zones to catch erosion that runs down the hill on their farms and gets into the streams. I'm suggesting, for consideration, that catch basins at the foot of those farms might be more might trap more erosion, contain more silt than grass or trees planted along in those buffer zones. So I'm suggesting it's something that you should consider, and farmers may want to think about it. I know they all won't agree with me, but catch basins at the bottom of those fields before they get to the streams would do two things. They would catch the erosion. They would also be settling ponds. The erosion would settle out and stay there instead of going further downstream. But they would also act as a reservoir for replenishing our underground water table. So you're doing two things. So that's something that I would ask you to consider. And on the point of ownership of land, I've always thought that ownership is important, but more important is land use. And there should be more emphasis put on the use of the land as well as the ownership of the land. And, Mr. Chairman, that's about all I've got to say.
Well, the night is young, Mel. Thank you. How we come along with your thoughts, Judy? Okay, Judy McDonald.
I didn't intend to speak this evening, but I came here more to listen to what people had to say, because this is my very first opportunity to attend one of these meetings. I really do agree a lot with some of the previous speakers in terms of how important it is to preserve the land and to promote the stewardship of the land, which I think has a very strong tradition amongst Prince Edward Island farmers. And I know it's something, I grew up in a mixed farming operation, and I knew how important it was, you know, to plant in a way which was going to really foster the land. And of course, in those days, we were doing things on a very small scale, and we had our hedgerows that had been put there by our forefathers because they knew that hedgerows were really good for the land in terms of preventing erosion. That was a no mistake. That was very wise. And you know, one of the things that it's really actually quite frightening to see the amount of corporate ownership and off-island ownership. And I wonder if their hearts are as close to the land as ours are. I rather imagine it's not quite the same thing as having grown up on Prince Edward Island and to be really concerned about how the land is managed and our water is managed. I think that's extremely important. I don't know if there has been much courage, I have to say this, from any of the governments in the last number of years in terms of really land management and land use. I find that there's a lot of very valuable farmland being developed into lots, and the lots are, you know, they're, I'm trying to think, it's just like off the front of all of the farms, and we're creating a lot of issues in terms of waste management and water quality and so on by developing, you know, the word is strip development, and it's become quite a serious issue. One of the things I think that is the problem is that farmers, as they retire, that's their retirement plan, is the sale of their land. And unfortunately, in a lot of cases, it's not profitable for young farmers, or it's very expensive for them to get into farming. So how do you make it so that young farmers can get into the business and to make it affordable, to have a plan in which we help them along in terms of, because I think, food security is extremely important. We need to know where our food is coming from. I think I've heard my brother say, the number of days in reserve, that there's food in reserve, and it's not much. And I don't know if a lot of people really realize that. I think we're probably better off here than Prince Edward Island than some other places. But, we have to be concerned about food security. We have to look after the land. We have to look after our water resource. And that all comes from good management. And I think that the best way of doing that is with people who have an investment in their communities and have a tradition of strong stewardship of the land. I think that's extremely important. And prosperity is not about being bigger, because as I've discovered as being, the sister of a farmer, that a lot of money goes to the people who sell machinery. And you find that a lot of farmers are indebted tremendously by owning large tractors and combines and whatever. It's very, very expensive operation today to farm. And you know what? Somehow or other, we may not have had as much cash around when I was growing up, but we seem not to have as much worry. And you know what? We could go to the beach on Sunday. Now that farmers work 7 days a week and they work into the dark of the night, and you see the lights out there in the dark of the night trying to harvest. And they don't have much rest. It's a very tough life today. I think we had it, we worked hard physically, but I think we had a better life and we had less worry. And I think we need to find our niche on Prince Edward Island. I think we need to find what, it's not all about being big. I think it's about finding out what we're good at and doing that extremely well. That's what I think in terms of the future. And I'm really inspired by a lot of the young farmers and the work they're doing in terms of smaller organic type farmers. I'm impressed with what's going on there. And I think there's, with that type of young farmer, we've got a great future. And I think it's not about massive, fields and cutting out hedgerows and causing erosion. I think it's about, I always say that when you come from a small place, sometimes it's easier to do things and to do them well because you are small. And I think we ought to look at that tradition of being really good at being small and doing it well and prospering and not worried about paying the banks and the machine companies. And you notice that there's a lot of people who have gone under in these last few years, and there's no surprise why, because it's too expensive.
No preparation? No notes?
No.
No, just Judy.
By heart.
I know you want to give her a round of applause, but for coming, I put her on the spot, and very articulate, Judy, but there's several things. I was almost going to interrupt you one time and say, you're not supposed to ask the question. I asked the question.
Okay.
But there's nothing wrong with that. But you asked the question, and then you partly answered it, and you basically was, how do we help young farmers get into farming? How do we deal with the successional issue, which is a really significant issue, very significant issue. And then you said, after you asked those questions, you said something like, what can we do to help? That's what I'm interested in hearing. What can we do to help? Okay.
Well, I really like the idea of investing in young farmers. Like, why not give people good, I think there's a meeting, actually Wednesday of this week. I can't be there, but I'm very interested to hear about the investment program and the tax credit for investment in farming. I think that's a great idea. And why not give tax credits to people who are willing to invest in agriculture? And also, too, to be able to buy up some of this land and save it from development, to hold in a bank so the farmers can acquire that land. I think that would be an excellent idea.
Well, if there are two things that are guaranteed to be in my report, one of them has to do with land banking.
Yeah.
guaranteed that. And the second one is how to be creative when it comes to dealing with, which I give you high marks, knowing your present job and your past history a little bit, but this whole matter of the pastoral landscape of Prince Edward Island. There are ways that can be protected to a lot of people's advantage.
You know, like say for instance, I'm in tourism now. I run a small inn in Rustico. And one thing that I do know is that, you know, the viewscapes are disappearing just because of the development that's taking place. Not everyone can enjoy the viewscapes because of development. And I think that's extremely important to protect. And we need to allow everyone to enjoy the shoreline. We need to allow everyone to enjoy the viewscape of Prince Edward Island. And one of the main reasons why people come to Prince Edward Island, they said it's like a movie. This is somebody described it. It's like a movie. Around every corner you see another beautiful scene. And however, they don't know that some of those scenes have disappeared in the last 30 years. And if things continue, because it takes a lot of courage sometimes to go against big money or big business and to take a stand that's in the interest of all residents of Prince Edward Island.
Okay, thank you very much, Judy. Appreciate your comments. Now, Peter, is a question?
No, I'm just regarding building lots. I heard a figure about 30. There's presently about 30,000 building lots available to build on PEI. So can you imagine what the island would look like a year from now if everybody decided to build a house? 30,000 building lots.
Some of that stuff is it's all very complicated, but we have lost a lot of good agricultural land to building lots, but there was no law to force the farmer to subdivide. I think in part it was because it was an economic necessity in some instances, and there may have also been family and so forth. So then we put in lots of rules and regulations, and the farmer who has dutifully farmed his land, been a good steward for all these years, there's no one to pass on, and he wants to sell a couple of lots because that's equivalent to his RRSP, so he's immediately slapped because he was a good farmer. My dad, who's 94, in a nursing home, he refused to sell any land. We had the largest farms in Hazelbrook, 180 acres. That's pretty big stuff, 180 acres. But I felt pretty proud. I thought we're the biggest farmers in Hazelbrook. And across the road, the person subdivided, got 10 or 12 lots in the Secretary Road. My father wouldn't do anything. And then later on, when it was important to sell a couple of lots, he couldn't, because he was now in the freeze zone around Stratford. And I think it's one lot off. So it's a complicated issue. There's no question about it. But there are solutions to it. Now, not all these matters are my jurisdiction. I know that land use is mentioned in number 1 there in 2 or 3 words in paragraph number 1. But there's another organization that's going to be going around the province in a short period of time that's been really charged with dealing with land use issues. And I'd encourage you to make some of those points of view very strongly known to that group. Now, we've had a good representation here from the right-hand side of the room, the left. Go ahead. Okay.
Tony Forrester, New Glasgow, small farmer. There's always a danger in coming up to the mic and stating your opinions, but here goes. We've had a lot of heartfelt thoughts. I concur with most of them, but what we have to deal with is reality. And thank goodness we've had this land use regulation for 30 years, but a lot of things have changed in 30 years. And at the moment, the small farms are all gone. There are a few little pockets here and there, but the reality is that the small farms have already gone. I don't like that. I hate to see the small farms go, but that's the reality. And what has happened is that the family farms of 30 years ago have got bigger. I don't like that either, but that's what the banks wanted. That's what the big agriculture. That's what the Department of Agriculture wanted, and so the farms have got bigger. And at the moment, if you go to the big box grocery stores anywhere in North America, the people have voted with their feet and said, yes, we accept the quality of the food that big agriculture is producing. And I don't like that either. But at the moment, people don't realize that the nutrient density of the food, the quality of the food is so poor that it's slowly killing us. It's affecting our health, and it's slowly killing us, and it's also affecting what we could have as a vibrant health. We don't have a vibrant health. We're okay, but we just feel so-so. It's the nutrient density of the food that's doing that. But so far, the people in North America have not realized that. And so we have big agriculture. My suggestion to you, as I said, thank goodness we did have these regulations, is to try and hold on to these regulations. We may have to let the farmers have a little more land. At the moment, there are pressures from people that need to sell their land because farmers don't have any retirement funds, and the land is their only means of getting any kind of a decent retirement. If we do have to increase it just as little as possible, I don't have a good number. If it meant that there are some well-managed big farms, big family farms, and if they could manage the land better and better crop rotations, it's not for me to say. I'm nowhere near using anywhere close to the limit. I'm only around 15% of the limit myself, but there may be big farms that right now, in the present reality, need more land just because they're caught in that trap. I don't know the number. I would like to hold it to as little as possible, but there are people that need to sell their land, and there are a lot of well-meaning people that want to start farming, and if we can hold the line as much as we can, in 10 years' time, the tide may turn and we'll go back to small farms. So that was my main point. I also counted up the from the Rustico side of New Glasgow, where I live, to the Line Road, there are 36 residences and 6 more summer residences. There are only 2 people in those residences that could be classified as farmers. And all those other people on those roads, on that road, I think would have a vested interest in knowing that at least a family farm or a family-owned corporation where they meet the farmer in the village, at the hockey rink, at the grocery store in Rustico, and they know that those people contribute to the community. I think they would be much happier if those people owned that land than if a corporation owned that land. And so I think that it's very important to keep the regulations and hold on to them as much as we can.
Okay. Thank you very much, Tony.
Okay.
Appreciate it. Okay, we had one person on this side of the room. David Mall. Good evening. That's fine, David.
Well, first of all, I'll say I couldn't disagree with hardly anything that I heard so far tonight. Diversity is clearly showing itself here. I also moved here from Ontario. As a boy, we had a dairy farm near Ottawa.
That's a few years ago, though.
A few years ago. And although my family branched into real estate, we had a farm all along. And I made a decision, even though I was educated for something else, to get into farming in a larger way than we were. And at one time, Tony and I owned the same farm at different times. And now it's a golf course. And again, that's a point as to what has happened in our community. But I'm also one of those people that a number of people spoke against in terms of large. I'd also could be considered to be a scavenger farmer, because I, at one point with my father, we're partners, we farmed about 1,700 acres. We're down now to about 1,300 acres in that vicinity. Most of that is based on the seed production. I'm in the seed business. I grow certified seed and market that to, and there's some customers in here as well. But what's happened is I've sort of filled a spot, and I have probably 20 to 25 people who I rent land from. Only one of those is a non-resident, a lady from British Columbia. She bought a piece of land that did belong to a local farmer, and she asked me to continue farming it. Almost all of the people that I rent land from are renting it to me because I'm not a potato farmer. There's a couple of exceptions. Some of the exceptions are land that, with the 9% slope in the legislation that restricted certain farming practices with potatoes and so forth, made the land area much smaller, not practical to farm. And one of those is a farm in Kelly's Cross that's quite hilly. So I've worked pretty hard at cropping this land in a non-row crop type of operation, and including land around the city, Charlottetown, because the residents in the areas don't want to see a sprayer in the field every second week. So I've provided a use for land, and in most cases, this is land that's from people who are in their senior years.
But David, isn't some of your land technically in the city, or am I wrong on that point?
The farming operation itself, the base is in the city limits. Yes. So that's
Which is sort of interesting, you know, given the fact that your dad was one of the first realtors in the province, now well into his late 80s, but that there's subdivisions around you, but you haven't succumbed, your family hasn't succumbed to subdivide your land in the city.
I used to say it as a joke that I'm still farming because we haven't run out of money, but the reality is not that. This is not something that you do if you don't like it, and you have to like it a lot to do it. But in some of the earlier maps that showed non-residents, land ownership, and I had my real estate license in the 70s, and I might have sold some of those parcels of land at the time up in the North Lake area. Most of those lands, I would venture, were sold in the decades of 70s and the 80s. and the bigger pieces particularly, because farms back then were 5 chains or 10 chain widths, and they were 50 acres or 100 acres. And it was a case of land that when the LDC disappeared, there was all of a sudden no market to sell this land, and local people would sell it, and there was no restrictions at the time. So this land bought was changed over. Since the legislation came into place, there's been a real slowdown of that, and I don't feel nearly as threatened by, and I'm not a corporation, but by corporate takeover. And I think that word is maybe a little misused, because a lot of the corporations now are people who are island names, who are founders of communities in the island, and their children have decided to stay and farm the operations in the 70s and 80s. And the corporation was a method by which a lot of lawyers and accountants recommended that was the way you went. If you had 2 or 3
tax
sons,
reasons and liability reasons.
you incorporated. As a matter of fact, at one time I was incorporated, and my lawyer was Joe Giz, and Joe recommended we incorporate. Well, 5 years later, we dissolved the corporation for other reasons. But I've listened to the word corporate here, and I know when it went in, everybody was worried about the Irvings taking over. Well, the Irvings have found it's a lot easier to control the farmer and have him grow it than it is to control the land and grow it themselves. They can't grow it as cheap as they can have people grow it. So that threat is less. But there is a real threat here, and that is in Ontario, the land price in Kent County is about $12,000 an acre. In PEI, top land, farmland, maybe $3,500 an acre, $3,000. Most land for other agricultural use somewhere between $1,500 to $2,000 or $1,000, whatever. But there's people in the world who would come in here because we are a bargain. And as everyone has said, it's a small land base. And it wouldn't take too much salesmanship to sell a lot of the island away quickly if we didn't have some controls. So I certainly advocate for some controls. But I'll just get my particular situation. My father's 89. We're partners. He wants to retire, and I want to take it over before he's not able mentally, or he may pass away tomorrow, to complete this. The moment I do that, I'm going to be out of compliance, because I'll have over 1,000 acres. We don't own it. We only own maybe 300-400 acres between us in total. But my operation is geared to that. I have customers. I've built a business, a seed plant, that relates to that scale of marketing. So when somebody advocates that we should downsize, I'm saying, okay, so what am I supposed to do? Sell off a combine? Prepare to do less? Say to some of my customers, you better go to McCardle Brothers instead of me. I think there needs to be some reality in the whole process that in the year 2013, what was small in the year 1982 is not the same as it is today. I certainly not advocating that we throw the door open. I think it's served us pretty well. Mel Gass is a personal friend of mine, and he brought up a topic that is of interest. Our farm is on a little creek. When we first moved there in 1962, there was 8 dams on that little creek that ran up back into Winslow. Today, there's 1 dam left on it, and it's on my property. I empty that pond about once every 6-7 years and clean the silt out of it and put that back on the land. And I'm going to say that 90% of the silt that's in that pond is coming off of the Royalty Junction Road, because the government has decided to advocate a system of ditching where they make these deep V ditches, and then they put these riparian things in which only last for the first heavy rainfall. and the water runs red down the road. But I get the blame for it because I'm farming downstream from it. I have an organic component to my farm, and we have a rotation. We don't plow in the fall at all. As a matter of fact, we plow very little. I have big equipment. I had small equipment and 5 employees. I have 1 employee and myself, and I have big equipment. My 2 sons work out west. Thank the Lord for that. They actually can make a living that's appropriate to the lifestyle that society expects of them and they expect to get from society, because they certainly wouldn't get the same lifestyle as me. I lost my marriage because I worked all the time and didn't realize it, because you start working 70, 80 hours a week trying to make something go. I appreciate some of the comments about starting working small and doing a real good job. But you don't do that, in my opinion, starting off as a young person with nothing in your pocket. You can do it if you've got a pension you're drawing from, and there's a lot of people who have moved into small farming operations because they're semi-retired and or there's another salary, the partner's salary is supporting it, or there's a school bus in the yard. There's a whole gamut of things that have allowed for small farms to continue to exist in the island. But if you expect the whole island to be only small farms, what's going to happen is there's somewhere down the tax system or the public is going to have to support those operations, because the children that get raised on these small operations are not going to be happy with working day and night and not having all the things that their city kids have. And I face that with my children. So anyways, I've said enough for this time, and I'll thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, David. Thank you. Sir. From the back row.
Mr. Carver, this is the second of your meetings that I have attended. Oh, sorry, third.
Third.
Losing, can't even count.
Kensington, Kincor.
No, Charlottetown.
Charlottetown, oh yes. You didn't say anything, Charlottetown.
I didn't say anything Kincor either.
No. I talked to you afterwards.
Yeah, a little. Frustration builds a little.
Tell us your name so everyone knows.
Stuart McRae. I know a lot of you here and consider you all friends. So I don't want to be like Randall McFarlane said and be nervous of a shallow grave by what I say.
I think he's still alive.
Yeah, he is. I just want to, you know, I know, as I say, a lot of you, your friends, and the rest are probably friends I haven't met. I really have to thank Tony, I can remember your name tonight, for breaking the ice on the reality issue, and then for David to carry it on. I commend Peter, who I've never met, for being able to obtain 30% of his income from 4 acres. I'd love to be able to do that. I expect Peter has additional income. He must for the other 70. Fact of the matter is, one thing he said he grows is garlic and sunflowers. The market demand for those 2 crops I don't expect is huge. Therefore, I commend him for being able to do it. But there's many other people on the island, and there might be half a dozen more could grow the same crop. Otherwise, there'd be no market. I don't know any numbers, but I'm just supposing. Take a crop like wheat. You don't grow very much on 4 acres. Ask George. The store shelves would be pretty empty if all farms were small. Because to grow wheat, you need a combine. I don't think anybody is going to go back to, I even forget what it was called. I never used it. I don't know what a new combine costs nowadays, but it's 200,000 plus, I'm sure. It takes a lot of acres, the profit from a lot of acres, to pay for that. Some people might say, buy an older used one cheaper. Yeah, I've got that experience. And I see someone else in the room that has that experience too. And it's no cakewalk keeping those old things going. And parts from good equipment don't come cheaper. They're more expensive every year, if you can get them. There's so much more that I could say. A little bit of history, though. Hedgerows have been mentioned time and again here tonight and other nights. I remember it as a child. There was a federal, provincial, and farm, a three-way finance program. And many people in this room, well, some people in this room remembered. Many never ever heard of it. It was called ARDA, A-R-D-A. Don't remember what it meant. But it was a three-way split. What?
$5 an hour each party paid.
Okay, I couldn't remember the numbers, but
Howard Coles was one of the.
yeah. It was a program where the cost of a fairly large bulldozer in those days, in the 60s, was expensed. The cost of the bulldozer was expensed three ways: federal government, provincial government, and the farmer. And David says it was $5 each. And that was per hour, I guess. And the job of the bulldozer was to take out hedgerow, 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 fences. And so then I heard some people say that there's no conservation work going on. But on some farms, there's been conservation structures put back in, sometimes hedgerows, sometimes dikes. Sometimes those dikes are going exactly where the hedgerows used to be. So the hedgerows were a good idea, but it was encouraged that they be removed. I've thought of a lot more that I could say, but there's been so much touched on, especially with Tony and David, in the reality, and that's what that's what we have to work with. We have to be somewhat realistic. It's a nice, wonderful dream that all farms can be small and, as Sharon Labchuk would say, organic. It's a dream that will happen completely. It will happen more so, I expect. But for those of you who don't know, most or all of my acres are certified organic. And that's no cakewalk either. 2009 crop, I'll say, 1 year. I think it was 2009 crop. That crop was not sold, and I had no idea where it was going to be sold until June of 2010. It was sold in July. So at that time, that particular year, the market just wasn't there for organic crops. Maybe it is for vegetables, but field scale crops, and I should say, I have no vested interest in any of this regulations. I own and rent combined less than 500 acres, so I'm nowhere near the limit, and I don't expect I ever will be. But anyway, they're just a few of my thoughts, Mr. Carver, and
Stuart, so you say this is, first of all, I appreciate you doing this. You say you own and rent less than 500 acres. Do you have any thoughts, because I know you've sort of made some general comments and yet specific, but about the actual limits, have you any thoughts there at all? Especially since the existing rules don't even come close to affecting Stuart McCrae.
David Mall touched on a lot of the issues that I would agree with.
Yeah.
It has a very significant, has had, and I hope will continue to have a very significant place in PEI.
See, David has a real issue there with his elderly father.
And another topic that's been touched on at other meetings was the some producers. I can stand here and say it because, as I say, I can see both sides. But they said that some producers were nervous or would not stand up and state their case where they're being pressured by processors usually. So what's a grower supposed to do? He's being pressured on this side by his market, and he's getting a smaller margin of profit every year, perhaps, depending on conditions.
Why don't you have a seat? You've been standing there for a while.
I sat long enough.
No. Okay.
No,
Because I'm going to ask you a couple more questions.
well, go ahead. I'm not saying I have the answers. You're supposed to have the answers.
No, I got the questions, remember? You heard that line.
I did.
There's been lots of surprises I've had in these various hearings and meetings. And one of my surprises has been to find out that these famous potato contracts are only for an annual or a yearly basis. Is that right?
My understanding, and I was listening to somebody Saturday, this is Monday, Saturday, and I think there was about 5 guys standing around a warehouse or a workshop, and I'd say 4 of them were potato growers or worked with potato growers. And the word is that from them is that Irvings are just going straight to mediation this year for a 1-year contract. Basically no contract, I guess.
Okay.
That's only hearsay, but it's what I was told on Saturday afternoon.
Well, the annual alumni newsletter that comes out from Dow Law, the title of it's called Hearsay. So some judges say there's good hearsay and there's bad hearsay. So.
Yeah.
And this is sort of educating Horace Carver a little bit. Like one time in the agriculture community in Prince Edward Island, we had some contracts, and then we had a lot of seed potatoes, and we had a lot of table potatoes, and somehow we amazingly lost this wonderful seed potato business to a large extent.
Thanks to PVYN.
Yeah, unbelievable story that is. But I guess somewhere along the line, and this may indicate my ignorance, I would have thought that the potato contracts would have been for at least 3+ years. Did that ever happen?
I've never
No,
grown potatoes.
never happened.
But
Never
I don't think so.
I see. And,
That would be a dream.
yeah,
We may have had 2-year contracts.
okay, Bertha, 2 years. All right, thanks, Gordy. It just seems to me that if everything is up in the air every year until you get the contract.
Try farming.
Pardon me?
Try farming.
Try farming.
Every year, New Year.
Well, Gordy, I think you haven't been at all my meetings, but I've been appreciative of those the ones you've attended. But, you know, like I'm the first non-carver male since 1783 who hasn't farmed. Okay.
First smart one.
Pardon me?
First smart one.
No, I don't know about that.
So,
But I'm the eldest of five sons, no daughters in the family, now 4 sons. Okay. And not one son is in the farming business, and I'm the only son in Prince Edward Island. Okay? And I used to say that I thought that it was almost like a gambling process that was going on.
You were right.
You work hard, you do the very best you can, and yet there's so little under your control. Okay? And one of the things that amazed me was and I'm not being critical, I've said it before, is what I would call the lack of cooperation among farmers. That's what I used to see when I was growing up on the farm in Hazelwood. To me, there's strength in numbers, but I didn't quite see that. And I had some experience of where my father had a little, very small business where he sold potatoes on a regular basis to a couple of restaurants in Charlottetown, and did it for years. And one day we didn't sell any particular restaurant because it was under a cup at 25 cents. Another farmer came along, and all that farmer did was buy market share. It didn't help the agricultural community. But back to this, is that, so we, and I'm just thinking out loud, which might be a little dangerous, but so we want to have more farms and more potatoes and more machinery, and yet we haven't got more long-term contracts.
that's right.
Why don't farmers and all farm organizations come together to say that we need greater certainty in our farm business? How can farmers go out and afford to buy $300,000 and $400,000 combines? The combine in Hazelbrook cost $3,500. The old Ford tractor was $4,000. The combine was done in the halves between Gordon Carver and Mr. Jenkins next door. But those items cost more. Like, I'm not trying to get anybody wound up, but just that I am finding it amazing that these contracts are only for 1 year. I just don't understand that, guys.
To add to that, the contract price, I know nothing about potatoes, but I remember my father saying in the early 50s that he got $5 a bag for potatoes. I don't know whether they're 75s or 100s or 110s. But
that sounds okay.
That was good money.
Yeah.
In 51, 52.
Yeah, big money.
Some years right now to be good money. See a problem? The price we receive for commodities that are not supply managed has not gone up nearly as much as the cost of production.
Well, if I know one thing, I know that I can't introduce supply management into potatoes if I'm going to ever go through some communities in Prince Edward Island.
Oh, no.
That's not going to work.
That's another story.
Yeah, well, okay, thank you very much. Thanks, Stuart. Appreciate your comments. Now, we have managed to have 2 hours of discussion tonight. Granted, I took up about the first 10 minutes, and we never talked anything about item 2, reducing red tape or regulatory requirements dealing with the Lands Protection Act and IRAC. We'll come back to anybody that, I'm just trying to move this around a little bit. And so anyone want to talk about that? Anyone want to talk about the fact that number 3, utilities, that electrical companies now could be within sight of reaching their limits because IRAC has decided to count easement properties as part of your land holdings. The Land Protection Act is not all about ownership. It has to do about an interest in land and land holdings. And so you could own a 5 acres along the water. But if you have about 2 acres of a long roadway and easement that you share with everybody in the subdivision, then IRAC says that you really own 7 or 8 acres. And so in instances of electrical companies, that is becoming an issue, and it may even be an issue more than that already. And so anyone want to talk about those things, or do you want to go back to our previous discussions? Yes.
Potatoes. I don't grow potatoes.
Okay.
Anyway, Brian Turner, Winslow South.
Yes, Brian.
I could own 1,000 acres plus 40% for woods and swamp extra, and my partner, she could do the same. We could grow 1,800 acres of potatoes. How much more punishment would we want? All indications are saying that they grow 30,000 extra acres of potatoes in Idaho, and that threw the price. So we need to get the thing under control. We don't need any more potatoes. We don't need any more Roundup-ready soybeans. The deal with the EU, they're not going to take any of our Roundup-ready soybeans or none of our Roundup-ready corn. They're not going to take any of our beef because we got the hormone. And if they are, it's going to be outside the deal. We don't really need any more production. I know we lost 300 beef producers in the last 10 years, and they're gone, and they're not coming back. And I think we might have got 4 new ones, but we need to grow more grass, and if we can make a living growing beef. But and if we lose supply management, we're done. If we didn't have it, we wouldn't have a dairy industry. But if we do lose it, we'll be like the hog industry. We'll probably have 8 producers, and the whole, we don't need all this production. Everybody's so all geared up about, oh, this production we need. We don't need this production because the North American potato boys are saying, we got to get this acreage under control. We grew too many potatoes.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, that's all I wanted to say, but I don't know why everybody thinks they need all this land, because we don't need the production right now, because they won't pay us for it. We have like 10 years of BSE. It took 10 years for the beef price to come around. It's around $1.96. It was $1.98. They say the price of barley is going to drop to $180 a ton, and the price of beef is going to drop now. So I don't know why everybody's so all ripped up about all this production, and how much punishment does everybody want? And if we wanted more punishment, my daughter could come in and her partner, we could have another 2,000 acres plus 40% each and grow another 600 acres of potatoes, and we could have more punishment. So how much do you want? Anyway, that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Brian. Yes. Just. Okay, we'll hit the microphone, then we'll go to you, Gordy. Well, you can sit down.
I have one comment for Brian, and it's
Just
he's
for
talking
record,
about
just a record, where your name?
A. Buttimer. I just live up in New Glasgow here. What's all the production? What are we talking? Well, I heard a figure the other day that in the next 37 years, by the year 2050, we have to produce, in these 37 years, as much as we've produced in the last 10,000 years, food for everybody. So we may not need this product at the moment, but we're going to need it. And it's just, you're not going to be able to ramp it up in, like, there's too many potatoes right now, but I mean, there's good growing seasons. And everything hit right for a lot of people. There's going to be a lot of years where things are not going to hit right for a lot of people. And if the lady said we only have a few days worth of food in the system, there's going to be a lot of hungry people in the next 37 years.
Thank you. Cordy Lang.
Well, Horace, regarding price, we got a great price for our grains this year just because it didn't rain in the States. If it rains this year, we won't get a price, so it doesn't make much difference what we do here. But I just want to follow up on what David was saying, and it concerns me that this act, we think we're doing something, but are we really doing anything? Because people seem to find ways around this. Now we have mergers and acquisitions or whatever, because people have to get rid of their property, these big farms, at some point. Now, he's talking about his father and his 1,300 acres. There are an awful lot of farms out there that are just a mishap away from not having shareholders. What do you do in that case? You're a smart lawyer. What happens? Tomorrow they're outside the law. What are they going to do with their farm?
Well, I can guarantee you, I'm sort of revealing more stuff tonight than I really want to.
Well, I hope at the end of the day here that you'll tell the truth.
Gordy, you've known me a long time.
I know, and I know you will, but there are facts here that it's very, very difficult for government to do what they're trying to do to control the size of business.
Well, I guess I'll repeat what I said to CBC after the ADEP Council meeting, because the suggestion was made by the reporter that this was an attempt to open the floodgates. And I said I'd never heard that and that I wouldn't be party to it. Okay. But when I was in Bangor the other week, I went into Lucille and I went into a restaurant, Gordy, and there was no one in the restaurant. It was Pizza Hut. The only people there were 6 Islanders, 2 retired civil servants, senior, their wives, and a couple of the kids. And so, how are the meetings going, Horace? And I said, oh, we're having them, good attendance and so forth. So how do you think the whole process is going? So I just paused for a moment and I said, I knew it wasn't going to be easy, but I didn't think it would be this hard. But one of the things that has really impressed me is this whole matter, Gordy, of succession. And there is something that has to be done. And one of the things that has been wrong with the attitude of the people that are dealing with the act and so forth is there is no understanding of grace, there's no understanding of discretion, and that there are unique situations that require understanding. Okay? When I first started to practice law, the rule was, I'm not talking about lands protection, that it ought to be possible to get an estate wound up in a year. Dream on. That doesn't even happen now with people who own no land. Okay? I've been involved with some farms where deaths happen, and they happen more than one. They can happen 2 in a half a dozen years, and then you've got a real mess in your hands. I guess I think that there ought to be some real consideration so that in David's situation, Stanley passes on as he will, that there can be a significant period of time in which David can make some steps to see what the law, as it's going to be at that point in time, will be able to be implemented. It would help if we accepted the concept of an estate as a person, even though the deceased is deceased. I'm sorry to be too legalistic in that. But you see the point I'm making, okay? Is that as long as the title remains in Stanley's estate, and here don't tell Stanley I'm having him dead now, David. but as long as there's David Mall and there's Stanley's estate, like what's wrong with operating Stanley's estate the same way as if he was still alive?
But aren't we only fooling ourselves?
Well, let me put this, well, you know, I don't know. All I'm saying is sometimes you have to be practical solutions to do certain things in this. So that's one aspect. Then if you have, like I had a telephone call the other day from somebody, He was really upset. Well, no, that's not right. He was really concerned because his parent has dementia, okay? But the only thing is the parent doesn't realize has dementia.
I don't either. I don't realize I have.
No, I haven't been talking to Shirley. But so, you know, how do you deal with that? And they just got off the telephone talking with people in the regulatory systems and so forth. And I spent a half an hour in the telephone talking to that particular farmer and making certain suggestions. And he says, we're going to have to take some legal steps and so forth. And I want to know, Mr. Carver, if I should hold off for 6 months so your report will come out and help me, do you think I should hold off? And I said, well, so-and-so, I don't know what I'm going to say, but if I did, I couldn't tell you. He said, I thought so, but I thought I'd just call anyway. But Gordy, this succession thing has to have some practical applications here and make it work.
It's a serious matter. The other matter is, what about lenders? What about if the farm falls upon hard times? Are they going to want to sell it to the highest bidder? Certainly you want them to, because they'll be coming after you forever, eh? You know, if they can't extract from the marketplace because of this legislation, how are they going to look on that?
Well,
I just think you got a lot of things to think about.
yeah, I have. There's no question. Like on that very point, the point that you raise hasn't yet become a problem in a practical sense in the agricultural banking community. It hasn't. That when they go, there's a default, and they go to sell, and they can't. The legislation, that hasn't been a problem, okay? But there have been two side issues to it. One of the side issues is that there is a rule about the land identification program that the moment that something goes from the Crown and is sold out to a member of the public, then your land is automatically identified. Some of the things that have been happening is that a farmer who has defaulted to the lending agency and now they go to sell it, that there's a point of view that IRAC holds that therefore it automatically is now identified even though it wasn't identified just for the simple reason that the lending agency held the mortgage. Well, I can tell you that's the furthest thing from reality. That isn't what our law was meant to do at that time, and it isn't the way it is right now, and that point will be specifically addressed in the report because that's just a wrong interpretation of it, okay? The other point is, on the banks, unless you are highly successful and you have a tremendous amount of capital and good collateral, Gordy, I don't think a young farmer can basically get into business these days because too many financial institutions aren't putting any value on anything besides about 3 acres land and a couple of buildings and a house.
So what are you going to do with these big farms?
What am I going to do with them?
How are you going to turn them over?
Well,
I mean, people die.
yeah.
Sometimes people die in the wrong order. You've got a great big farm going, a couple of young fellows there, and how are you going to sell it?
If I do a lot of estates, I do a lot of estates, and I've made an awful lot of wills over the years. And just when you want someone not to die in the wrong order, guess what they do?
Die in the wrong order.
Die in the wrong order. Okay. I remember going to Wake a couple of years ago, and I've been away for a week, 10 days holidays, and I sit down and I read it. I can't believe it. And my wife says, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm going to the wake." And I get there, and the family says, "We wondered when you were going to come." They said, "So-and-so died in the wrong order." Yeah, that's right. They died in the wrong order. So you say I'm just dodging the issue? Yeah, that might be. But the present solution of dealing with succession and the Lands Protection Act is non-functional, is not working, and it has to be adjusted. Now, having said all of that, I'm only making recommendations.
I know.
But this report is going to be a different type of written report than a lot of glossy words that I have seen published in the past. It's going to be ding, 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 recommend this, this, and this, and there's going to be a bunch of questions out there, and I mightn't have the answers, but someone need to address them.
But I'm going to make one point.
Please.
The land, they can't go anywhere with the land. They can't take it and take it away. They can't do anything with it. If they use it right, no matter who they are, They're not hurting it. And I don't, big farmers use land right. I've went over this before. Small farmers use land wrong. Like, there's all kinds of farmers out there. And, but if the land is used right now, one thing you did bring up about these victory bonds, good farms are being ruined because there's pieces being taken off them and sold. If somehow the farmer that doesn't take that off could be rewarded for it.
He has to be rewarded.
And he has to be rewarded by the public.
No question.
And that land will always be there, and someone can farm it, big or small, someday down the road. I don't know whether there'll be big farms or small farms, but once they start taking these pieces off it, it's ruined.
Gordy, I agree. And one of the things I'm trying to do is in these meetings is I'm trying to get some discussion and going so people understand each other. Someone said to me at a meeting that I've gone to a number of them, they said, and you know, my opinions are slightly changed. I'm understanding and hearing different. To me, I regard that as a success, okay? In regards to my suggestion with the victory bonds is that at some point in time, there have to be some solutions to some of this stuff other than the provincial consolidated fund of the province. There have to be opportunities for people to open their own checkbooks because they feel so strongly about the public lands issue. And we need to encourage some people to open their checkbooks by being creative when it comes to tax laws that we haven't exercised and utilized so far.
And I'll just say one more thing. They were talking about the $15 bulldozer and taking the hedgerows out. I participated in that program on the first 100-acre farm I bought. The hedgerows are gone, but there's a better soil erosion system on that farm now than there was then.
Okay.
Because it's different. It's waterways and dikes and everything, but the erosion is controlled better on that 100-acre farm than it was before I took them out. So just because a hedgerow comes out is not necessarily bad.
Yeah. Always good to hear from you, Gordy. Gordy and I were in the House together, and Gordy was the chairperson of the Agricultural Committee in 1981 that came forth to the 18 recommendations that led to the Lands Protection Act. Okay, now, somebody else? Yeah, we'll come back to you. Okay, here's one of, pardon me?
I just want to stretch my legs.
Well, that's fine. I enjoyed being at the Young Farmers of the Week, and tell everybody who you are.
Jeremy Stead, beef farmer and soybean farmer from Wheatley River.
And this is the second North Rustico meeting that Jeremy has attended. The first one, he found out there was a notice in the door.
Well, I was here by myself.
You were here by yourself. Well, actually, I sent Patrick out to test the roads, and he kept calling me, telling me it was unsafe. And
Well, I even missed him. So.
yeah, well, after a while, he just stuck the nose up, Jeremy, and you was there to read it. Welcome.
I've been listening and listening and listening, and I've been taking points from everybody's views and opinions. Everybody definitely has a view and an opinion.
Yeah, I picked it up myself.
You've heard a lot of them.
Yeah.
Gordy was the latest one. There's big farms out there, but there's small farms out there. Someday, those farms are going to have to go into different hands. First, we saw all the red paint or colors going down the coastlines of land that's owned from off-island interests. For me as a young farmer, I'm here. There's 1, 2, 3 more guys here with me, 4, 5, 6.
There half a
There might be
dozen.
there might be 10 of us here that are under 50 that are farming.
I think a few of you are maybe even under 40, 35.
So my point to you at the young farmers meeting, you said, what's the biggest thing that I see as a challenge? What did I say? Gray.
I have to go, don't.
Gray hair.
Yeah, I know, you did
Right?
mention that,
And you covered your head.
Yeah, I know. Not all my hair, just part of it.
So at some point, all this land has to be turned into, so at some point, the land is going to be transferred or it's going to be sold or something's going to happen with the land. It's going to be. So the way I look at it is I'm trying to keep as much land island owned as I can, but the laws now are restricting me that I can only own 1,000 acres as an individual.
How many acres? Are you in your own operation now or with family?
I farm with my mother and father, but it's two separate.
Okay,
It's two separate operations. There's mine, and there's theirs, but we share land and equipment.
Okay, sorry, don't let me divert you.
Yeah. So we haven't incorporated, we haven't increased, but we are pushing the limits as an individual at
Okay.
1,000 acres. So they're both going to be 60 this summer.
Well, that's not that bad.
It's not that bad, but but they want to retire.
What?
They want to retire.
At 60?
I know.
Oh.
So if all the land comes into my name, all of a sudden I'm at the limit. I'm done.
Well, send them in to me, because my philosophy is very simple. Don't transfer control and ownership too fast. The nursing home regulations have changed. Go back and enjoy life at 60.
They're stubborn and they don't listen, and that's what's going to happen.
And that there are stubborn people out there.
I know.
It's terrible.
I know. So, my opinion, I guess, is that the limits need to be increased.
How much, Jeremy?
The suggested amounts.
Pardon me?
The suggested amounts to 1,500 as a individual and 4,500 to a corporation.
Well, that's just from one organization suggesting.
Well, that's a very reputable.
It is a very reputable organization. Yeah, it is. Do you belong to that organization?
I do.
Okay.
No.
No. There was this, I'm going to have a little bit of fun. He's not here tonight.
Not just belong to it. I said on the board, but.
Oh, do you? Anyway, we had this gentleman. He appeared at a couple of meetings. Nice guy, good sense of humor and everything else. And he got up at a Summerside meeting and was praising the resolution was passed by that particular organization. And I said, I think you were the gentleman that moved the resolution. He says, yes, I am. So
That's just patting himself on the back.
Well, I was patting him on the back by drawing attention to him.
Another thing that's been mentioned several times tonight is succession. An increase in the limits will definitely help ease succession greatly. There's a lot of guys that are at their limits, and if in my situation, us farming together, sure, we own all our land together basically. But if we were separate and we both had 1,000 acres, and then it was all going to come to me, then all of a sudden I'm out of compliance. And if I didn't want to incorporate, what if I don't want to incorporate? Maybe there's reasons out there that I don't want to incorporate.
That's right.
So
Everybody got wills in that organization of yours? The family?
I'm going to say no because I don't.
Well, the only point I make is that if you think a situation is bad as it is now, without a will, it gets worse. And Gordy, we don't have to worry about a 2 or 3 or 5 year recommendation that I may make about succession. If somebody dies and they have a child under the age of 18, you're looking at 10 or 15 succession rule, and some lawyers going to make some money, and the courts are going to have some of the treasury expanded for the child's age. Young farmers, Patrick Dunphy, get your people to make wills, please, in the farm organization. And I appreciate what you're saying, but do you lease in and lease out?
We do.
Okay. What would happen, like there's been a lot of criticism of the leasing out, that you can't deduct it. Okay. What do you think about the leasing out criticisms?
Well, it should be deducted.
Okay.
If it's leased out to another farmer to use, then it will be counted on his.
Yeah. And do any of your
acreages.
lands qualify for the environmental exemption that Brian talked about and somebody else, the 40%?
Yes.
And have you applied for that?
No,
And why not?
we're not at our limits.
Oh, I see. That's the reason.
Yeah.
Okay. Has nothing to do with red tape or
No.
having bureaucrats involved in your land or anything else? Okay. Anything else you'd like to tell me?
That's it.
Can you encourage some of those other young fellows up, come up here?
I can kick them in the feet.
No.
Would you like to see another one?
I'd like to see one or two more young farmers here since it's such a good turnout tonight. Brian? Okay, Brian.
Everybody seems to be terrified to bring their partner in on. Everybody wants to own the land themselves. It seems that, like, my partner, she can own 1,000 and I can own 1,000 plus 40%. Everybody's terrified to bring the partner in. I don't know why, but anyway, maybe it's dangerous territory. Now, let's get on to wills here for a minute. If you're going to will it, do something better than that and get your name on it and their name on it and automatically go to you. Otherwise, you're going to pay 15% state tax. Think about that.
Well, with the greatest respect, it isn't quite that simple. Okay. Would you like to say something? Please. Representative from Kelly's Cross.
Okay, my name's Di Hill. I'm from Kelly's Cross, but as you can tell from my accent, I haven't always been an islander. Exactly, yes. My husband there, Des, and I, he's farmed all his life. I've got a degree in agriculture. I farmed as well. We had a smallish farm in Britain, which we rented. We could not afford to buy farmland. We felt very threatened by the neighbours pushing. The rent seemed to go up for every 3 years. They changed the rental system in Britain. We knew we were going to be out.
What were you paying for rent per acre there?
Oh, what are you paying now, Des? No, it was $100 an acre back in 1997.
In England?
And that was the cheap rent, that was the old-fashioned style, but they were all moving on to a thing called a farm business tenancy, whereby the sky was the limit. So we knew once our old-fashioned tenancy came up for renewal, we were going to be put into a farm business tenancy and we wouldn't be able to afford to carry on. And we couldn't get any more land because all the other neighbours had got that. No chance of renting any more land.
So is that what propelled you to come to Canada?
Yes, exactly.
And did you come from one island to this island?
No, we went to Manitoba and we farmed in Manitoba for 12 years.
Oh, really?
We started off with a grain and beef farm. We started off with about 800, 900 acres. Increased that to about 1,500. And we reached the point that most larger farmers have to face. Do you start getting bigger? Because with most, I'm not saying corporate farmers, I'm just saying bigger farmers are arable farmers. You're sort of on an upward spiral. You all know what I mean. You're farming so many acres and you're finding it difficult with the machinery you've got. It's especially stressful when the weather's not right, so you upgrade to a more expensive piece of machinery, whereupon you think, well, heck, I could farm more acres with this now to pay off the extra money I've had to borrow to buy it. And it just goes on and on and on and on. And it's the same with dairy farming. You get more quota because you've built a bigger barn, so you buy a bit more quota, you've got more cows, then you need a big tractor, so you need some more quota and cows to pay for the payments on the tractor to make the silage and blah, blah, blah. And you all know what I'm on about, any of you that are doing this. And it's just really, really stressful. And we know lots of farm families over there and corporate people who actually have to have another job off the farm for the winter. So we decided we didn't want to go that route because we were basically just, to go that route, you are just a contract grower for Cargills or whoever. They tell you what to do, they dictate the prices of the inputs, they dictate the prices of the product when you sell it. They carefully calculate it so you just have enough to keep you going for next year and to keep the bank happy. So we decided to go away from that, and we went into beef farming 1 year before BSE, but never mind. So anyway, we struggled on. Yeah, 2 lots of BSc. Yeah, we had BSc in England before we left. So, yeah, we've managed to overcome 2 bouts of BSc. So anyway, we carried on farming. I took my real estate exams, became a realtor, and I worked...
Are we talking Manitoba?
Manitoba, yeah, still. And I worked on the side as a specialist realtor selling farm real estate to Europeans, encouraging them to immigrate into Manitoba to farm. Because it's something that we're talking about here. Farmland is so expensive that most of the kids can't afford to get into farming. The homegrown kids can't afford to get into farming. At the time, Europeans could because the exchange rate was so beneficial. You could even sell a house in Britain and buy a decent-sized farm in Manitoba. That's what the difference was until the great crash of 2008. So that's what I did on the side. And we carried on there until 2010 when we decided to sell up and sort of go into semi-retirement. And we came to PEI. I'd actually sold a farm back in Manitoba, and the guy who owned it had moved to PEI. You probably don't know him because he's from the New London area. But anyway, and so we came over here to have a look to see what he moved to, fell in love with the place, and we've got a little farm in Kelly's Cross. It's only...
And what do you farm?
It's only 36 acres, 1/3's open, 2/3 trees, and we just got a few sheep. Just a few sheep. So basically, all I want to say is I can see the argument from both sides. It's really difficult. But I think a lot of the concerns that are expressed about the bigger farmers and the corporate ownership seems to be that people are worried about the environmental impact. Us old folks, we used to learn husbandry way back. And I think a lot of people are worried that these days the big corporate farms are perhaps... They're so busy chasing their tails that they're perhaps not looking after the land like they should do. And it's something we've got to address because it's a small island. There's only a finite amount of agricultural land here. The water supply is entirely groundwater. So it's something we've really got to be careful about. You know, all these fish kills and stuff like that, we've got to stop that happening. And that's all part of it. And I think that is part of the reason that people are getting so upset about the possibility of corporate farms getting bigger. I don't think it's the corporate farms getting bigger part of it. I think it's the environmental impact part of it. I mean, the other thing that worries me is how you're going to get all this huge machinery down the roads. I saw a great big, what was it? Was it an 8-furrow reversible or... What was it, over at Kensington Ag the other day? It was absolutely massive with an articulated 4-wheel drive tractor. And we were like, how are you going to get that down a road like ours? No, and into the field over that tiny approach. How are you going to do it? But I think it's the environmental issues that are worrying a lot of people. I think that's why there's so much, let's say, heat going on in these discussions. A lot of people getting very upset about it. I don't know really what to say. I mean, we've lived out west all that time and we've seen the farms get bigger. We've seen the demise of the family farm out there. We've seen the corporate farms take over. It's not really a pretty sight. There is soil degradation. There is loss of habitat. And there's also loss of community. Where we lived in the spring, we'd see the neighbours going up and down on the tractors in the spring, everybody waving to each other. The last year we were there, which was the spring of 2010, all we saw were 2 tractors when the corporate farm came to blitz the land all around.
Sorry, this may not be an overly important question, but I'm sort of interested in it. What did you know about becoming a landowner in Prince Edward Island before you came to Prince Edward Island?
I knew about the Lands Protection Act.
What did you know about it?
I knew that it was there to protect the unique way that Prince Edward Island is.
And when you first heard the figures of 1,000 and 3,000, what was your reaction to those figures?
I thought that was probably plenty big enough for the way the island is, because of the small size of the fields and the topography.
And the quality of the soil.
And the quality of the soil, yeah.
Okay, all right.
Because the soil here is far more productive than it is out west.
I'm very impressed that someone who was in Derbyshire went to Manitoba and now in Kelly's Cross, Kelly's Cross, that in the midst of the Queen being admitted to the hospital and the Pope retiring the first in 600 years and a new one elected, and Stompin' Tom Connors, that you managed to come to...
Well, we only got our citizenship on Friday as well.
Oh, wow.
Thank you.
You thought it was time to make it legal. Anyway, it's just delightful to have you come. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And-
So yes, so part of the worry for us also is the community falling apart when a lot of the farmers leave the land, when the farms get bigger and the farmhouses either, well, out west they used to just move them off, they just got moved off, or just left to rot if they weren't very good. Here, because of the small size of the island and the fact everywhere's only 20 minutes from everywhere else, then I would think that the farmhouses here would probably be either holiday homes or commuter homes. And once again, it is a worry that some of the communities might start to falter a little bit. Like already moving away from the farming, from the agricultural land ownership. If you go from here now, how far do you have to go when you travel west before you come to a community that's got people living in it at this time of year? You drive through Cavendish, nobody there. Drive through Stanley Bridge, nobody home. Yeah, all the way to Kensington, not a soul about. And that's the other thing that worries me about the off-island ownership of the coastal properties and some of those areas there.
Okay. Thank you very much. Patrick, do we have either you or someone in your group going to be able to come and talk to us a little bit more? Sterling McCrae. I'm going to turn to, come on up and have a seat, Mr. McCrae, but I am going to see if we can get somebody else in that young farmers group come. Have a seat. Nice to see you again.
Thank you. I don't know what I can add to this. It's been very interesting listening to some really heartfelt thoughts that people expressed. I was once a young farmer and was a leader in Junior Farmers Organization in the 50s, and I still think I'm young.
That eventually led to the New Glasgow Lobster Suppers, of which you and a number of families own, right?
That's true. But let's stay with the farming for now. If it wasn't for that, I still wouldn't be farming. Anyway, a lot of different points brought up. David Mall mentioned the little dams and the streams and things like that. I think the same way he does, that we've lost something there in that silt catching and things like that. It's always been said that the water warmed up and it was too bad, not good for the fish. But we're talking agriculture more so than we are fish, not to take, it's sport fishing that we're thinking of. I guess I've done a lot of the wrong things that other people did too. I was participated in the ARDA program, tore out a few hedges, and also the Land Development Corporation, I took part in that and acquired some neighboring farms. And that worked well for me, I thought. And maybe it could be done again.
I think the reasonably high recommendation might happen.
Anyway, I know most of you that are here, and Tony spoke well about things, but I want to bring up a little thing that back in 1952, my neighbor bought a tractor. I think it was a 30 Massey tractor, and he traded with Mr. Lem Craswell in Hunt River. He traded 5 fat beef cattle for that tractor. What would you do with 5 beef cattle these days? I mean, it's just, that's the way it was. And it's true. I'm interested to hear the lady that came to us from Manitoba to Kelly's Cross, and also from England. That was quite an interesting story. And yes, I see the way that communities are losing people, and churches are closing, and schools did close and consolidated. That had some good things. Maybe I've been a lot smarter if I'd went to high school, but I got my education in Greenvale School. It was 10 grades, and I started in 1940, so that tells a lot. But I still think I'm young, but I don't have any sons, and I got a bunch of land gathered there together, and I've been guilty of selling a few lots off one side road too. And well, I needed the money. I don't think it hurt our operation so far, but it could. Like, people don't like smelly things. Another thing, I'm doing a lot of rambling here, but since we lost a lot of beef farmers and hog farmers, we don't have very much manure to put on the land. And our land base in PEI is quite sandy. Well, sandy loam, but it needs to have organic matter in it to keep its tilth. And we're losing a lot of that. We're trying to grow without manure, and it's not working very good sometimes, especially if you don't rotate. I think better stop. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sterling. Thank you. Well, we'll think, Edith, about that in a second. But Patrick, are you or someone from your group going to come up? I think you're okay. No, I think you're going to be okay. Patrick Dunphy from Millview, the president of the Young Farmer Association of Prince Edward Island, and he is an active young farmer, and he's involved with big operation, maybe, that's not all in the family, is it?
No, not at all.
And I think that's awfully important to hear about. And
okay. So you want me to talk about the
I want you to talk about that. I want you to tell me about how hard it is for you to get land, and how some of your colleagues find it hard to even know who owns land. In your case, it's not too bad because your mother works in the law office, and she's a distant cousin of mine, but she doesn't work in my office. But
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, all right.
So I guess the operation that I'm involved in, we farm. Last year it was around 4,500 acres in southeastern PEI. This year we're able to.
How old are you, Patrick?
I'm 29, not quite 30 yet.
But you've got a couple of partners who are older than you.
I do, definitely, yeah. The farm is, besides my own operation, and I farm about 500 acres out of that 4,500, and I am incorporated, so I guess I'm a corporate farmer. And the rest of the land is owned by, partially by some investors from the Midwestern United States, whom, if it wasn't for them, I probably wouldn't be farming today. We've also aligned ourselves with a farm in the area, a fairly large farm that was having some financial trouble, and we were able to come together with them and I guess achieve some economies of scale that way.
Okay. But you've wanted to be a farmer for a long time.
Oh, definitely. Our farm in Cherry Valley, it's about 180 acres. We've been there since 1835. And yeah, to say that it's in your blood would be an understatement, I guess.
Okay. Now, the night that Patrick and I went to, I was impressed with people in your age bracket and a little bit older that were there. And I guess I was there about an hour and a quarter, just making a difference. But after I've left, I'm sure you've had some chit-chats and things like this. And I put the questions to you. What are things that you would like to see happen, your organization would like to see happen to help young farmers?
Well, the first thing that's been touched on here numerous times is the resurrection of the LDC. Like, you go around the table at our young farmers meetings, and two buddies that are with me here tonight, like, the only thing that's impeding the growth of our own farms is the access to land. And you know, back in the day when the old LDC was going, you know, a lot of guys that are established today got their start through that program. You know, it's not the capital to own the tractors or to buy the seed. That stuff is easy to get. Like, it's just a couple signatures and you got $100,000 worth of soybean seed landed in your yard the next day. It's to find the land that will make an operation viable is the real problem for, I think, the vast majority of us in the Young Farmers Association.
Okay. Now, what else?
I think that'd be a pretty good start if we could rent some land and expand our business that way.
Well, let's assume that may well happen. What else?
We didn't really think that much further ahead.
Well, there's Murray Harbour tomorrow night, and there's Charlottetown and Crappell, Wellington. You guys give it some thought. I guess my thought when I left that farm center that night, I said, boys, oh boys, you got to hand it to this group of about 12 that were there. And apparently the number was small. We usually have 18. I hope it had nothing to do with who was being there, but it had to be canceled, I guess, to be reconnected. But here was Patrick, and Jeremy, a couple of other guys are here. There was a picture in today's paper of the young couple with Bob Ray. They moved from Ontario. They're organic farmers. They came to PI. And then there was a young gentleman there. He looks only about 20, but I know he's your age.
Yeah.
He moved from Holland to come over here without family. They don't live here. And his thesis as an undergraduate student, he wrote it in English, where it's organic farming in Prince Edward Island. That's how committed he was to coming here. Okay. Now, I must say that I'm his lawyer, but anyway. But it was a pleasure to represent that young person and advance his cause to the appropriate authorities. That's how committed. And so I left that meeting that night, and it was sort of a bit of a cold, I wouldn't say stormy. And I walked to the car and I drove home. I just said, boys, oh boys, how committed those guys are. But I must say that I said you've taken on tremendous risks and uncertainty in it all. And I get back to the accidental comment that Judy McDonald made. What are we as a community going to do to help you guys? It can't be all government. To quote a wonderful friend of mine who no longer exists, that if government is going to give you every single thing you need, in your opinion, to make every problem that you have disappear, that government has to be strong enough to take away every single thing that you hold to be true and important. And that's one of the issues why I'm talking about these victory bonds and a few other things. I want to see people buy into some things that they have to do as opposed to just saying, you can't do something, you can't do something. What can I do? One of your colleagues the other night said, I can't even find out who owns land. Okay, there used to be a map library in Charlottetown, right behind the registry office. You could go in and you could say, give me an ortho map at the corner of, I don't know, Drake Road and Millview Road down near you. Okay, you can't do that any longer because the map library has closed. Okay.
Yeah, that's a huge problem. And like you alluded to, my mom working at the lawyer's office, like if I see a field down in Murray Harbour South or something that isn't being farmed, I can just call her up and say, you know, I have that access to that GeoLink site through her,
Yeah.
but I know her law firm has to pay dearly for
Well,
her
it's not-
using that service.
It's not that dear. You know, to me, I was impressed with that. You know, why can't we have in a couple of the access, like I was in the Montague Access Center this morning at 8:30 doing something on behalf of a client. Like, why can't I walk into the Access Center in PEI down in Montague and there'd be a little booth there and there'd be a government GeoLink map system that I don't have to pay for, that if somebody like you wants to come in and check it, you can. To me, it's not very complicated. Anyway, maybe between now and the middle of April, if you guys like to put a few thoughts together or come other, send them to me, because I am awfully impressed. Not that I'm not impressed with anybody else. I'm awfully interested in what someone like you in the front lines as a young farmer thinks there's some issues there.
Will do. I appreciate
Okay,
it.
thank you.
Thank you.
Edith, I'm going to Edith, I'm going to give you an opportunity to make some short remarks, and depending upon what you say, I'm going to permit somebody else of a differing point of view to respond, and after that, I would like to make some comments, and then I would like to socialize with you until you want to go home. I'm not talking about Edith, I'm talking about people in the room here. I've known Edith a long time. This is Edith Ling, and she is very active in the National Farmer Union Organization. This is her husband, David. And I think it's fair to say that the NFU is going to be presenting at probably the Charlottetown meeting in a few weeks' time, right?
That's right. We will be presenting on April the 8th, 2 weeks from tonight in Charlottetown.
As I don't know when you came in tonight, but I'm going to be hearing first that night from people who I haven't heard from before.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's fine. Well, my remarks are really short because time is going on here, but I was just sitting here, especially in the first part of our meeting tonight, and I was getting the feeling this is getting to be a discussion about big versus small. And I don't think that's what this consultation is all about, really. I think there's room for big farms and there's room for small farms here. Don't think we all have to be big. Don't think we all need to be small either. I think there's room for both. But I think the question is, how big is big enough? I might tell you that I too am impressed with the young farmers. I think it's just so wonderful to see them because we're not going to be around forever and it's just the future. And I think it's great. I don't know if you're familiar, and I'm not very familiar at all yet with this. I think it's called Farm Invest. Phil Ferrero through the ADAPT Council was mentioned to, someone mentioned it here tonight. It's a way for people to invest in farming, and I'm interested in learning more about that program and see what's involved in that. I just want to tell you that I was talking with a biologist here tonight who's been around for a long time, and he told me, he said, you know, I am losing sleep at night worrying about what's happening to our streams and our rivers. Everything is silting up so badly, fish kills and so on. And he said, I'm just really worried about what's going to become of this place. The nitrate levels are continuing to climb, where it's at 1 in 5 is beyond the limit where it's safe to drink that water. They're continuing to go up. And I was talking to another older farmer, and I'm really concerned with not having a diversified operation where you have cattle on the farm and using fertilizers. And he suggested that we should have one animal for every acre of potatoes that's grown. A potato farmer, if you're going to grow potatoes, you have one animal per acre. That should happen.
And Edith, one of the things that I thought I had a reasonable amount of knowledge about the Act before I got into this process, but it's the other things that I'm sort of learning, and one of the things has to do with livestock and crop rotation. And I appreciate that statement is you're quoting a third party and so forth, but how do you even come close to making that happen? And like, how can that happen? Like, there's a gentleman out there that wants to have one animal for every acre of potato, but, and I don't know what ratio it is now, but how do you, let's say we don't have that. How do we get to that?
Oh, it's very difficult. It's just a suggestion we
Extremely,
had.
it's very difficult.
It just shows the importance, though,
Well, I
of having
understand-
manure.
No, I understand the importance. I mean, but I guess what I'm saying is that we went from having a hog industry that's gone
Right.
to a beef industry. I'm not quite sure what, I'm amazed that we still got
A
anybody
lot of
in
it's
that-
gone.
A lot of it's gone, to how we can get from that to this gentleman that says we need to have a cow, an animal for every acre of potatoes. Like, in order to make that happen, we have to turn our government and our society into a type of society that I'm not sure that is good.
I realize that, but I think that was just his idea of
Yeah, no,
how
I
it
understand.
could.
Yeah, but
He
it-
didn't have any solutions for how you
I'm
arrive
interested
at
in
that.
solutions.
Yeah, well, he didn't have any. That was just his suggestion to show
Yeah.
how important it is
Yeah,
to have
exactly.
manure and not to be constantly using these chemical fertilizers. And really, the soil is getting so loose that it's running into
Yeah.
the rivers, and that's where all the
Ruth, are
sediment
you
is coming
struggling
from.
with a question there?
Yeah. My partner had a very good solution. He was an organic farmer. Art Rowling used to make it one of the finest farms on the island.
This is Ruth Brewer, age 89.
Didn't
need to say that.
And not.
Mine was still as sharp as ever.
Now, they utilize all the seed manure, and also got from the fishermen. They drove up with the lobster bodies and all of that, and it was all worked into the farm. And they grew wheat that anybody who was allergic to wheat could eat. And the things that were done there, and that farm had cattle, it didn't have potatoes, except for homegrown for themselves. It's vital to reestablish, and my father was an organic scientist, and this is something that is vital for the land to go back to the land. And this land is so fragile that the machinery we're putting on it is destroying it, basically. And we just don't have that. And unless we refurbish and utilize where it was coming from, and to use that for not just one animal, but to take the seed manure and all of the putting it back on the land, giving the land a time. And Art even had the birds who came up, and he took care of the birds, and they were helping with the land as well.
Okay. Ruth, thank you very much. If it's okay with Edith and David, I'd like to call it quits. And thank you so much, Ruth. I really appreciate that. And thank you, David. And,
Maybe I could make one comment.
well, maybe we could save it for another time. Would that be okay?
Just in our experience, I find that you've got to have a cover crop on your soil for the fall. And as soon as we harvest our grains, we go in with the sweeps on our chisel plow or one of these, I'm sure that with the rest till tillage they have today, go just 1 inch and go in there 2 passes, and you'll eliminate the use of Roundup, and also you get a ground cover growing, and it will protect the soil from erosion.
Okay. Thank you very much. No response? No response to any of that? No?
Well, the next best thing to per acre would be green manure. That goes back to your 3-year crop rotation, which is so
Okay.
Another thing that's been used that hasn't been used in years now is the mussel mud. That was one of the things that kept the rivers flowing, cleaned up. They get the mussel out of the silt, dig it up out of the rivers flow, and put it back on the land.
More understood.
New Glasgow, that's how they kept their land going. Buck Hill, they every spring, they went into the River Clyde and dug up all, because a lot of that would flow down into the River Clyde, and they had that work and took it back up onto the fields, because half the fields would fly down in New Glasgow and get in the water.
My father is the agricultural background. My mother is the daughter of a fisherman in Murray Harbor, and well acquainted with uses of lobster shells and all that type of stuff. But years and years ago, I heard my elderly grandfather, who lived to be 101, he and his cousin were talking about hauling mussel mud. And I asked them what it is. Well, they explained to me what it was. And then they drew the conclusion that it was time to put some more mussel mud in the land. They also talked about horses and all that type of stuff. And that may be of a different age, but maybe it's, I'm interested in what you're saying about green. So if you don't take my card and send me a note, that's fine. I just want to wrap up. I know it's much later than you expected, and I appreciate your attention here tonight and your attendance and so forth. I have a couple of serious comments I want to make. Why? Because we are within sight of our last few meetings. And the piece of paper that I'm holding in my hand, I'm referred to at one or two of our recent meetings, and it seems such a wonderful cross-section tonight, I want to refer to it again. One of the things that disturbs me, no, let me say this. One of the things that concerns me is the belief held in some quarters that the Lands Protection Act has somehow protected us in such an extent that we can't touch it whatsoever. Well, I'm amazed that except for the first meeting or two, we haven't had any media attend. And I think they've missed some wonderful opportunities and stories to hear about what Islanders think. And also they've missed some opportunities to hear what the Commissioner has to say, such as right now. Okay. I know this act reasonably well. I was involved with it from day one. I know its weaknesses and I know its strengths. And I can tell you that 30 years is a long time for a piece of legislation. There's been a lot of changes to it. But as I said a long time ago in the evening, there was only one successful court challenge. There was another one that came near to court. The first Premier Giz asked me to represent the government, and I found a solution that necessitated keeping on the court. I'd like to keep laws out of the court. One of the first things that I am bound to do professionally as a lawyer is to keep my clients out of court. Okay? Court ain't fun. Okay? And when statute gets examined in courts, strange things happen. Okay? There have been various regulations that were originally intended, provisions with the statute and regulations that are different in the original intention than what they have been applied to right now. I made the statement in a much smaller setting in Kincora that if somebody came to my office, and before I get to that, I refer to this, the Globe and Mail business section, front page, February 25th, 2013, has this. International billionaires are forking over tens of millions for New York's latest and ultra high-end living as a hedge against uncertainty, and many are doing it sight unseen. And they say that last year, and there's a whole bunch of these condos listed, but in May of 2012 and in July of 2012, 2 condos were sold in New York each for $90 million. And in February of 2012, one went for $88 million, and one in June of 2012 for $70 million, and one in November 2012 went for $54 million. Well, forget the small stuff. Let's just go with the big stuff. 90 times 2 is $180 million. If somebody came to me as a lawyer and said to me, Horace Carver, we have $180 million. We will give you a banker's check. It'll be deposited to your trust account, and we want to find a legal way to buy up $180 million worth of land in Prince Edward Island. And when we don't want to go through IRAC, and we don't want to go through executive council, but we want a suggestion how to make this happen. Okay? Now, how long would that take me to come up with that solution? 2 hours. Half the time will be to find a typist how to do it, the typing, because I know how to do it. Okay? And one of the things that has concerned me as a private citizen for some time is how do you represent clients and at the same time have any concern as a citizen. Okay? Now look where I find myself. Okay? Well, I know this, that there is a difference between domicile, where my trunk is, to quote the old expression, and ownership and residency. And so I could lay a plan out that there would be no IRAC application, there would be no executive council approval, and it all could happen just like that. It would take some time and some planning, okay? But it'd be all perfectly legal. Okay? And so, folks, one of my amazements throughout these meetings has been trying to get people to address limits. Everyone wants to go up, and there may be certain instances, depending upon the nature of people's occupation and fact situations, that maybe certain things can happen to accommodate certain things. But I keep going back to my old story. Why does Horace Carver, Charlottetown lawyer, need the right to own 1,000 acres of land that's not near post-production? Why does my wife need it? Okay. But at least we live here. And we have, if I asked you to write down a piece of paper tonight, the wealthiest families in Prince Edward Island, I can guarantee you that 90% of us would have at least 3 or 4 of them all correct. But that type of wealth is nothing compared to the wealth that exists presently in this world. Okay? And all I'm doing is trying to glean from you folks ideas and suggestions. I have my own. Some of you know me. I'm as stubborn as independents can possibly be. Okay? Whether my recommendations will be accepted, I don't know, but they will not be misunderstood. You will not need to read them the second time. You'll get the gist of it the first time. And I hope that it'll have some impact. But some people say that we got to reach for the moon, or we got to do this or do that, because we'll never get another chance. This is our only chance in 30 years. No, no, no. There's lots of different options and choices how we can do certain things. And one of the things I really am impressed with as I listen to islanders and citizens in this province is how articulate you are, how compassionate you are. And guess what, guys? We're really on the same side, even though we hold different opinions. And before this piece is all over, I would love to think that one of these sessions, if we broke up into little groups, which I haven't decided to do yet, that we might be able to come up after about an hour with 3 or 4 suggestions of core values that we could all agree upon, whether we belong to the NFU or the Federation or the Fish Organization or the Habitat or whatever it is. And you know, if I ever got a sense of that type of unanimity and that type of support, gosh, you'd be hard pressed as a land commissioner to ignore that type of stuff. But I may be pipe dreaming, the case may be, but I don't think that we can afford to treat land equivalent to the New York stock market or the condos going in there. So there are going to be some specific suggestions in that particular regard. But I'm only human. I'm only one person. And the amount of things I've been told is absolutely phenomenal. Okay? And somewhere, I'm hoping that this whole process, we have learned more about each other. We have learned more about some other situation. And that, as one person sent me a 2-page letter the other day, he has a degree in a whole bunch of different things. And he's an academic person in agriculture. And I'm going to quote it, perhaps in the report. He says, "Until I walk in the farmer's shoes, I don't understand how the farmer feels." And you know, how do we feel when we walk down the grocery store or the grocery mart? How type of decisions do we make then? Okay? And that's why I intend to put a recommendation in my final report that's going to create the opportunity for people to open their wallet. And instead of putting it into an RSP, put it something else, that we can do certain things to help certain things in this province. And I knew one of these days, these types of thoughts were going to come to the forefront. And tonight just happened to be the night because I thought it was actually going to be Crapo or Charlottetown. Thank you for coming.
I'm just finding out who you are. Your parents still at Monica? Yeah. I'm one of the courts.
Yeah, I know.
I didn't know you were both
here. They're both getting very old.
Yeah.
But they're okay.
They'd be in the 90s, would they?
No.
Decided that we needed to keep our island within island people and the amount of land for island people. And that, when Horace came up with this number 30 years ago, I was really up in arms because he said it was 1,000.
What's my number?
No, he said legislative.
Hi, Jimmy. Jimmy.